Okay. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Obviously, with the sacking of Dean Smith at the weekend, that meant one quarter of the Premier League managers have been sacked or have resigned this season. So we're only at the beginning of the second week of November, and yeah, one quarter of the Premier League has decided to change managers, which is really stunning to me. Absolutely stunning. Yorkshire County Cricket Club have had yet another player come out and allege that racism and bullying was going on. So that's further trouble for that organisation, and we'll see what happens in due course. Are English managers overrated? We haven't seen an English manager win the Premier League. Premier League's been going since 1992, and an English manager hasn't won the Premier League. Um, we've had English managers win the FA Cup, not the Premier League. The old Division One, yes. Are they overrated? Well, it's the international game, so that tends to, in my opinion, the game is global. The best players across the world play in the best leagues. The best managers coach in the best leagues. But well, I don't think they're overrated necessarily. I think Eddie Howe, a lot will now be focused on Eddie Howe and his time at Newcastle. He's got money to spend. I think he is the right man for the job at St James's Park, and there are some that don't because of the way his time at Bournemouth ended. But he was at Bournemouth for a very, very long time, from League Two all the way to the Premier League. So, yeah, British, not English. There's the difference. The British managers were Scottish, so there's the difference. Are English players overrated? In the transfer market, yes. I think the transfer market overrates players, and I think generally players are overplayed and overrated. As I say, I've said for well since the beginning of the channel, I think the quality of football we're watching now is less than 15, 20 years ago. And yeah, I think in two of the FA Cup games I watched out of the four, I fell asleep. I fell asleep in two out of the four games over the weekend that I watched in the FA Cup. I was surprised I didn't fall asleep in the Sheffield Wednesday Plymouth Argyle FA Cup game. To be fair, that went to replay. That was a 0-0 draw. Um, I think of a lot of players are overrated and overpaid. Yes, I'm not a big fan of Gareth Bale. I think he's massively overpaid. Is he a good player? Yes. Is he injury prone? Yes. Is his attitude wrong? Yes. His attitude was better before he left Tottenham. I don't hate him. I don't think he's a bad person. I think he's overrated. There's a difference. I don't hate him. I just think he's overrated. He's past his best abilities, and his form has declined since he's had his big pay rises. His attitude, I think his attitude. I think before he left Tottenham, I think his time at Southampton, he realised, I've got to make it as a professional. He debuted at 16, so he was in the spotlight, the national press from a very young age. I think he's the same age as me. He might be younger than me actually, but he debuted at a very young age in the Southampton first team, admittedly in the lower league, but um, when a player that young makes a debut, the national press, it doesn't matter what league they're in. It was the same with James Milner. It was the same with Wayne Rooney. The thing is, James Milner and Wayne Rooney won multiple league titles. Now, yes, Bale has won a league titles in Spain, but I don't think I've got better hair. I just don't have a top knot. I mean, if I do that, I don't look too bad, but I need to sort out this top bit. But I wouldn't say I've got better hair. I'd say I'm more. I think the problem is with a lot of players, they get a lot of money very, very young, and a lot of them don't have qualifications or skills. And it's not just I don't like the Bama. A lot of them don't have qualifications or skills outside of professional sport. And this is something, and not just football, but this is something that professional sport needs to address and address very, very soon. Because, in my opinion, um, most academy products, and we've seen a report um, out about a Man City academy player who ended up taking his own life. He was told he wasn't good enough, he didn't make it. Now, I'll have to find that on the news website when I've charged my phone a bit. And it's the same for any major professional sport, be it here in Europe or in North America or in Australasia, Asia, Africa, South America. It doesn't matter where you are. A lot of players don't make it past youth ranks or reserve level, and then they leave the sport. And just look at football management. We are recycling the same managers because less ex players want to get into management because there's no job security. I do have the. I was actually going for the 1970s Johan Neeskens Dutch footballer kind of style, but I do accept the mid 1850s, 1860s American Civil War Victorian gent, uh, Otto von Bismarck, kind of sideburns, facial hair. It's November. I always have crazy facial hair in November. Regardless. No, Rashford. I think. General von Bismarck, Chancellor of the first the German Empire. Yes, von Bismarck. Very important. I mean, that's a video for the other channel, to be fair. Um, Very important political figure in German unification in 1871, and European and global politics until he was. Yes, yes, yes. We like a bit of Prussian aristocracy. Oh, Johan Neeskens, he was a Dutch football player in the 1970s who became a manager. He was a very, very good player, overshadowed by his captain Cruyff in the 1974 World Cup, but I think a far better player and an engine room in that Dutch midfield in the 70s. I have two. I have two channels. I have the History Buffin as well. I was going to do a live stream on the History Buffin, but I sort of decided to catch up with the Maple Leafs being battered by the LA Kings yesterday. I watched replay of that. God, the Maple Leafs are overrated. So if you're an NHL fan, the Maple Leafs are so overrated, and they overpay 4 or 5 players. Like half their salary cap is invested in 5 players. That is ridiculous. You're not going. It's the same with the Oilers. Too much of their salary cap is locked up in a handful of players, so it restricts your debt. But yeah, Neeskins, brilliant player in the 1970s. There's quite a few good players in the 1970s who had George Best had facial hair like this at one point. And hair like this. Quite a few players in the 70s had sideburns and hair like this. There's a Reading player called Robin Friday in the 70s, well known for some of his antics off the field. Um, I'm a Blackburn fan for my sins. I have been since 1992. But it's good to see fans of some lesser known clubs or clubs at various levels in the Football League or in world football or in just sport in general. I mean, we've got viewers from, you know, on this channel from all over the world. My rugby league videos are very popular in Australia. Oh no, I don't know. I've never been. I've never lived in Lancashire. My granddad supported Burnley. My other granddad was a Liverpool fan. Cheltenham Town have had a very interesting history. They've been in the non-league at times. I'm fully aware what league Cheltenham Town are in, but it's nice to see like fans of like some less fashionable clubs or more regional clubs or clubs that play at lower levels. It's just nice to see, in my opinion. I like, you know, I mean, I don't really follow League One or League Two football, which is interesting when I watch the FA Cup because I get to see a lot of players in the first and second round and a lot of teams that I don't normally you wouldn't normally see. And well, Sheffield Wednesday draw a lot of games. That's not hard. They're unbeaten in 8, but they've drawn most of those games. Portsmouth, Pompey. I've been to Fratton Park more than once. Rickety old stadium. And when the sea fog comes in on a midwinter's game, oh, you could barely see the other end of the pitch. Charlton and Ipswich aren't the teams they were. Rugby question: if Ealing got promoted, where should they play? The Trailfinders Stadium. That's what they play. That's what the Broncos also play. Trailfinders. Uh, that's their home ground. They shouldn't go to QPR. QPR Stadium is not a rugby stadium. Rugby league's tried it there. The pitch is too tight, and the in goals would be tiny. So if you were trying to do a kick through it, it just wouldn't work. It doesn't work for rugby league. It doesn't really work for rugby union. They've tried it before for internationals. It's a lovely stadium, QPR. I mean, Loftus Road is a very tight stadium, very intense atmosphere for a smaller crowd, but it just doesn't work for um, you know it just doesn't work for rugby necessarily because the pitch is too narrow and too small. And if you play an expansive rugby game, be it league or union, Loftus Road is a very tight pitch. And with the way the stadium is laid out at Loftus Road, uh, it does actually affect how the wind blows. So if you've got a kicking game, it'd be interesting. True. I mean, look, London Broncos used it in Super League. I mean, if they get a bit of investment, maybe. I think they would want to stay. That's like Esher. I mean, they have London Scottish playing in Esher. Um, I personally think the amount of union clubs. Obviously, a lot of them have now moved out of London because they all were. A lot of them used to be based at Richmond, so London Irish, London Welsh, London Scottish, and they all moved around the home counties. They sort of lost some of their attachment to London. Where am I in England? My local team would be like Maidenhead United or Reading. Um, Bracknell Town's up the road, but Reading or Maidenhead United would be the nearest professional teams. I used to live literally a stone's throw from Maidenhead United's York Road Stadium, about a 10-minute walk. And my mate, a friend of mine, had a pub literally on the York Road outside Maidenhead, but that's gone now. It's a car park. But his new pub is round the corner. So I remember seeing Leighton Orient in their first league match in the non-league, play Maidenhead United, and there was a bit of crowd trouble, and the police didn't have a clue what to do. Yeah, Loftus Road. I love the stadium. I've been there a lot. It's a very tight, intimate ground, and for a smaller capacity stadium, the atmosphere is loud there. Um, and but the pitch is too small for rugby. If you want to have an expansive game, if you've got a passing and running game, and you want to be expansive, it's not great for that. And if you've got a close kicking game, it's not great for that either because the in goals are just far too small. If you were to, I mean, rugby league has tried it and it didn't work. And Wasps have for a while, you know, yeah, but then you would just have to call it Wimbledon. I would say stay at Trailfinders. They've got the 3G all-weather pitch, so they shouldn't have any games postponed because of the weather. They're established in the Ealing area. They've got that fan base, and they would lose that link to. But look what Exeter did with Sandy Park. I mean, when Exeter were playing there, it was a small stadium, and they built it up slowly. It's like Harlequins with the Stoop right next to Twickenham. Harlequins could play at Twickenham, but they choose to play at the Stoop, and they've slowly developed the Stoop into a really like Northampton with Franklin's Gardens. Again, that's a great facility. You don't want to lose that connection with the community that supported you since foundation. Just how it is. I mean, London Irish ended up to the Medeski because Richmond they didn't want to develop it. Um, but yeah, if Ealing get the right foundations, then sure. But Newcastle play at Gateshead, um, Newcastle Falcons, and that stadium isn't very big. It seats about 5,000. So, and Trailfinders has a similar capacity. So at the end of the day, you've got to be self sufficient and live within your means. And unless you have massive financial backing, then that's going to be difficult. Um, and planning permission regs and all that. But Trailfinder Stadium is a fine facility for the level they're playing at. And I can see, Ealing making it eventually. But with the way rugby union's going at the moment, there are plans to try and ring fence the Premiership, which I think is wrong. And that's mainly been driven by the Bristol Bears owner, who I think is a bit of a knob, because he wants to protect his breach of salary cap, which he's getting away with right now. But the Bristol Bears spent a long time outside the top flight. They were badly run. They pumped a lot of money in. They're clearly in breach of the salary cap. They're doing what Saracens did. And the rugby union at club level globally, not just in this country, is in a mess. It's the way the stadium's built. I mean, QPR have no plans to redevelop or expand Loftus Road, but it's a very tight stadium. But the atmosphere is great. I like the atmosphere at Loftus Road because of the way the stadium's built and how tight it is and how close you are literally to the pitch. Um, I think a lot of these modern stadiums, you're losing that like intimacy and that closeness to the pitch, and that atmosphere. They are a bit soulless. I've been to the Medeski a lot of times. I've been to St Mary's, and I find the atmosphere can be a bit lacking at times. But we're seeing less and less of these old school stadiums. I mean, Loftus Road actually isn't that old. If we're being honest, its current form with the stands was an '80s build, so it's getting on a bit now in terms with modern stadia. But it's a reasonably modern stadium, um, much like Selhurst Park at Crystal Palace. I got hit in the elbow at QPR. I went to Brentford versus Q a couple of years ago as a neutral. Thank God I have a normal size forehead when I got hit. Um, yeah, I mean it's. I've been to the old Griffin Park, the old Brentford Stadium. Uh, it did need updating, and Brentford, instead of trying to redevelop it in place, decided on a new ground. And I do like what they've done with the new Brentford Stadium. I have to admit, the new Brentford Community Stadium is a very nice modern facility, which still retains a lot of that intimate nature. It's just built to modern standards. But the old Griffin Park was a rascally old stadium, um, and yeah, it served its usefulness, its purpose, and it would have cost, I think, more to rebuild in place. Um, I hope it doesn't get ring fenced because then you've got teams like the Cornish Pirates who and other clubs that are very competitive that won't get a chance. Uh, yeah, massive. Well, forehead. It depends on your hairline. I mean, I'm quite lucky with my hairline. Yeah, I'm going to be doing like my previews for the next NRL season, like I did this time last year. In a little while. I want to do an NRL state of the game, like the state of looking at the NRL right now with the rule changes and the direction the game is taking. I do have some concerns where the game is heading in Australia and in the Super League here. I like some of the rule changes. I dislike others, and now Rugby Union is doing similar rule changes in regards to the 50-22 kick and the line dropout in Rugby Union. It's meant to reduce kicking. It's actually increased it. I want to see more ball in hand. I'm obviously watching the women's internationals. I've noticed that the 50-22 and the dropout is being used. Not as much in the men's game. The men's style of play is different. The women have adapted to these rule changes. And in my opinion, rugby union is been very reactionary as well. I think both codes have been very reactionary with some of their rule changes right now, and that's not necessarily a good thing. I think with rugby league, especially the NRL, they need to let these rule changes bed in for a couple of seasons, and at the international level as well. I think there needs to be a little bit more unification and a little bit more kind of cooperation between the European-based leagues and the Super League and that structure, the NRL, and the new league in North America. There needs to be a little bit more cooperation and a unified rule set because in international rules you can still fight. The NRL has a different rule set to the Super League, and when this new professional rugby league format in North America really gets kicked off next year, it'll be really interesting to see what happens. Obviously, more rugby league news. The Ottawa Races have now, you know, uh, originally from Hemel Hempstead, they've moved to Cornwall, as we discussed previously. I don't think Cornwall was necessarily a bad idea. It's nice to see rugby league in a new location, a non-traditional location. There are fans across the UK. The RFL would have you believe that we don't support the game in the south, which is a lie. Otherwise, why would the Broncos have been a very half-decent Super League side for many, many years? And why we'd have two teams based in London, in the Scholars and the Broncos? But I think, well, the Ottawa Races wanted to join the Super League structure and follow on from the Toronto Wolfpack, um, and the reason why the Wolfpack fell would be the same reasons why Ottawa would not have worked, and the fact that there was so much expenditure and a waste of money and a real poor lack of direction in regards to the Wolfpack. The Ottawa races, even if COVID hadn't come along, I don't think the Wolfpack would have been sustainable long term. Uh, and I don't know. I mean, their move to Cornwall does puzzle me somewhat. It's more of a rugby union location, but rugby league has a problem in grassroots development in the UK and growing the game outside the traditional areas. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. We'll see how decent that Cornwall team is, and whether that eventually, much like the London Broncos, they can, you know, build up players from the grassroots who are local to Cornwall and Devon. That will, I think, massively benefit rugby league in the UK. Um, Cornwall Pasties. I think it's at the moment it's the Cornwall Rugby League Football Club. Hopefully, they have a nickname at some point. Um, I hope they do well, and I hope, obviously, long term they develop players from the southwest. Much like the London Broncos and London Scholars, a lot of players on their books are from the southeast, which is really, really good. The fact that obviously they didn't go back to Hemel Hempstead is a disappointment, but the state of the game in the UK is not great right now. It isn't great. Um, in regards to Solskjaer still having a job at Man United, there's a lot of calls for him to go, but you've got to be careful what you wish for. You really do. A lot of that. Has he stabilised the situation a little bit? Yes. Is the team better than when he took it over? Yes. Are there a lot of problems still from when Ed Woodward was in charge as director of football? Yes. I mean, again, Ferguson made it very, very clear that by the end he wanted to retire a lot sooner than he actually did. And he decided to prolong his stay as manager. And then the David Moyes experiment, and then the Van Gaal and Mourinho with a bit of Ryan Giggs in there. They've been very reactionary with their managers. Yet they've still won silverware, if not the league, since Ferguson retired. But it shows how good a job Ferguson was doing with the players he had. Because I think, I don't know. I honestly don't know what the situation is with Solskjaer and how long that can be sustained. Um, he has obviously had transfer funds to play with. He's brought Ronaldo back to the club. I think that was a mistake, personally. Ronaldo is well past his 2 years past his usefulness at this level. I think the Euros proved that. The team in general is I don't know if they are lacking a hardened, grizzled Roy Keane type in midfield and a Paul Scholes type in midfield, and they're lacking that dominant centre back at the back, much like Vidic. They've not really replaced Vidic. I rate Vidic over Ferdinand, but they haven't got that strong centre back partnership. Phil Jones, obviously, he's been a misadventure. And as a Blackburn fan, I know he was developing well, but we played him more as a central defensive midfielder, like a sweeper role. So when he was younger, but he's been injury prone. Harry Maguire's not living up to the price tag, but again, that was again the overinflated transfer market. And Luke Shaw again had a lot of injury problems. This season, his form has tailed off. He was playing really well in the build up to the Euros, and having that Euros delayed a year, I think, helped him get his fitness back and his motivation back. No, I'm not a Reading supporter. I've been to the Medeski a lot. I'm not a Reading supporter. I've got friends who are Reading fans. I've got friends who are Chelsea fans and Arsenal fans, and a lot, and fans of clubs in the southeast because of obviously where I live. But I'm not a Reading fan. Although I have been to more Reading games than Blackburn games, simply because of just as a neutral, it is local ground, and it's very easy to get to from where I am. As a travelling fan, even it doesn't matter if you're home or away fan, it's easy access by car, by bus, by train. It's in a very good accessible location. Their training ground is 2.5, 3 miles from my flat, and I with my job I go past it regularly on a weekly basis. It's a great facility, smaller than you think though, but it is a very modern facility. Um, I wouldn't necessarily say like Solskjaer's doing a bad job. I think inconsistency with the team is a problem, and I think some of the signings, some of the players there aren't doing well enough. And the youth production is starting to misfire a little bit. May not have been were famous for their youth setup, much like Liverpool, and some other clubs have got really solid youth foundations. I think in recent years that's starting. The talent level isn't as good, but I've stated for a long time I don't think the quality and talent level in football now is what it was 20 years ago, and I do equate some of that with the wages and transfer fees, and the rise of social media. I mean, players are more distracted now. I mean, Pogba, he's like an Instagram player. He's more interested in his Instagram half the time and his haircuts. Pogba spends more time on his bloody hair than how he plays. But as I said, I think the quality level is not as good. I do enjoy watching like the FA Cup and watching those lower league teams play. It is actually quite refreshing watching that slightly lower level because they're playing for the love of the game more. Their wages are a hell of a lot less, and you actually see what it means to some of these players who are playing at a lower level on more realistic wages in footballing terms, which I think is where wages should be at for football. The year I was born, the average salary was near enough, just under between 50 and 70,000 a year. That's now your average salary per week. So wages are like 52 times bigger than what they were 32 years ago. That is a massive wage inflation that I don't think is sustainable, and they keep going up. And that is actually affecting clubs on smaller budgets with smaller income streams. And the TV deal is badly designed for how it's split. What do you make of the England squad? Smith Rowe got a call up, and we're looking at the young players to take. We've got another. The World Cup is a year away, and with the delayed Euros, some of these younger players got an extra year of club football under their belts. The Euros had taken place a year ago. I don't think England do as well. So some of these younger players that have made it into the England reckoning and around the squad and have got more game time, I think it's benefited them delaying the tournament by a year. And with the World Cup in Qatar, obviously a year away, that gives an extra year for players to get game time and recognition and develop. It's the same with the Rugby League World Cup next year. That's giving an extra year for us to see with, again, new rule changes. A lot of players have retired that would have played in the World Cup this year. So that again, with tournaments being delayed and disruption, ironically, has actually benefited a lot of younger players. And it's, as I say, look, if the Euros been played a year earlier, I don't think Italy win, and I don't think England get to the final. So I think having the Euros this summer rather than last summer benefited a lot of players and benefited several teams who were at the Euros. And I think it will help with the World Cup being slightly later in the year. It gives those extra couple of months of some players to break into first teams in August and September before the squads are announced. It gives that extra few months rather than having it in the summer. That delayed tournament in the winter actually, ironically helps more players develop and may pose more headaches for national coaches. But as things currently stand, I think Italy are, in my opinion, the best team in the world right now. For how they're playing, for form, the development of players, the style that they've got. That's my opinion. Let me just quickly check some of the other sports headlines because I was talking about the Yorkshire Cricket Club and what's happening there. Just get rid of that crap off Facebook. Why is that there? Let's get BBC Sport up. And then I'll look at some of the international sports news like the NHL because obviously the Chicago Blackhawks scandal is still unraveling and there's still more to come out, I think, about that because at that period of time there were several incidents. I mean, Morgan's opened his mouth about the Yorkshire scandal. Joe Marler is to miss the Australia test after a COVID-19 test. Stephen Gerrard's been linked with the Villa vacancy. I don't see him leaving Rangers this season. I see him leaving in the summer, but not now. Um, right, the government is planning to step in if Yorkshire and the ECB do not take real action over what's happening with their scandal. So that's really blowing up. Um, England hockey accused of institutional bias over club suspended ban. Oh, this is interesting. So when I talk about hockey, normally I'm talking about ice hockey, but in this case we're talking about field hockey. England hockey, so field hockey, has been accused of institutional and structural bias by a club that appealed successfully against a 12-month suspended ban for breaching a code of conduct. The governing body was found to have broken its own rules when investigating Barford Tigers Hockey Club over complaints by two other clubs. The chairman of the Birmingham-based club has written to England Hockey. I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name because he's got a very impronounceable overseas name, and I don't want to ruin it. The chairman accused of shocking abuse of power after an appeal panel quashed the sanctions. In a statement, England Hockey Chief Executive Nick Pink, you couldn't make that name up, could you? Said it's become clear that there were shortcomings in the initial process, and we at England Hockey are saddened and disappointed by this, and recognise that the process needs to be reviewed and changed. There was a breach of ethics and behaviour. There was complaints by Yardley Hockey Club and City of Birmingham Hockey Club that related to sexism and harassment offences. In 2020, a disrepute complaint panel imposed a 12-month ban on Barford Tigers, a sanction that was suspended for 2 years. But an appeal by the club was upheld on the 8th of October, with the panel saying England Hockey had relied upon an invalid application of the disrepute and offence regulations, and the procedure was fundamentally flawed. This has been a very difficult 2 years for everyone at the club involved. England Hockey is an institution with dozens of full-time staff, including a full-time legal team, who are not only complicit in tarnishing the reputation of a small inner-city club run by volunteers, so this is at lower level, but fail to follow the rules that they themselves wrote. It begs the question, how and why was this allowed to happen? We were relieved that an independent appeal panel were able to look at the facts objectively, and all findings and sanctions against the club were quashed. A letter was sent to the chairman. The findings that England Hockey broke and disregarded their own rules is a disturbing conclusion, and whilst a shocking abuse of power is something that we are suspect throughout the course of dealing with them. Institutional structural bias. This was a case for the national governing body bend the rules to serve their own narrative that an ethnically diverse club must be in the wrong. I believe it's because Birmingham is a very diverse city. In the letter, the chairman of the club called for a full apology from the governing body and an investigation to how it broke the rules and opened complaints procedures. Apparently, oh God, racism is being used in this one. Oh dear, this is a long one. That's not good. So, England Hockey is now in the spotlight for how it deals with punishments for clubs and players. Great Britain's Eurobasket women, so the basketball, their 2023 qualifiers to be shown live on the BBC. So we've been talking about how basketball doesn't have great national media coverage. The women's game's getting some. Whether that helps grow the game, free-to-air TV, we'll see. I mean, it'd be good to see the men and women both get more coverage, but it's what it is. Women's Big Bash. Pogba could miss the rest of the year because of a thigh injury. I don't think Man United are really going to miss him, to be honest, because he doesn't do much. And Ferdinand, and this is what I find interesting. So a lot of people will be obviously complaining that players like Rio, ex-players like Ferdinand, don't go into coaching. And he's being very critical of Solskjaer. And a lot of people say, well, why don't you give it a go then? And a lot of them haven't really got the balls to deal with the big egos. What else have we got? Some tennis news, some football news. Yeah, Rashford getting his MBE. Pity about his Wes Brown haircut. Stockport County versus Bolton. Wanderers is the replay is meant to be shown on BBC. So now this is the when I was talking about the youngster, the Man City youngster who committed suicide. Jeremy Whitson, a footballer who killed himself after he was released by Man City, did not feel he got the right support following an injury. So it wasn't that he wasn't not skilled enough. He just had a bad injury, and Man City went, "We're going to move on." Yeah, I think it's the women who are getting the free to air coverage, not the men. So what the viewership's like, we'll see. But Jeremy Whitson was 18 when he was found hanged in his family home last year in 2020, 2 years after the club let him go. Um, the centre back was signed at the age of 13, but a serious knee injury in 2018 prevented him from playing for 5 months, and in the December he was released. Um, he failed to find a new club. The injury and the City's lack of assistance, he personally did not believe he was receiving the right support to find basically a new employer because once you hit 16, you can sign your first professional contract. Um, his dad claimed that City assured him that he would still be in youth reserve games and that other clubs could scout him with provision to sign, but he never actually um, did play. Da, 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 da. So yeah, there's all sorts of bits and pieces in there. It's a long article. I'm not going to read into it, but that is interesting. Obviously, Eddie Howe has now obviously been announced as Newcastle United's new manager. So that'll be interesting how that all plays out. Yes, so we've mentioned Ireland. Well, Ireland's going to be touring the US. Um, I think it's a T20 tour they're doing. That'll be interesting to see how that goes because it'll be interesting to see the growth of cricket in North America. I mean, Canada play it, but it'd be interesting to see how the Americans really buy into the sport. But there's not really a lot in sport going on right now, apart from obviously the ongoing Yorkshire racism scandal. Joe Marler's tested positive for COVID-19, so that is a problem for England's front row in rugby union. Um, but it could actually affect the wider squad, so that's interesting. So England, Australia in the rugby. In regards to Stephen Gerrard being lined up to replace Dean Smith, I'm not so sure he wants to leave. To be honest, I can't see Rangers being happy to let him go. Um, I mean, Martinez is linked. Kjellman, the Danish manager's linked as well. Husenhartel's linked. Graham Potter, Brighton's linked, but they're all happy in their job. I mean, the candidates that are all linked have all stated they're all really happy where they are. So let's see what. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know on that one. But yeah, it is interesting. I mean, the Yorkshire scandal is now having much wider impacts. But the problem with the British Basketball League is the talent is spread thinly. Um, yeah, obviously it would be nice to see growth of a domestic league. Um, so we'll see what the viewership figures when the BBC actually announced what the viewership figures are for the women's basketball qualifier. But look at the Olympics. I mean, the funding after the 2012 Olympics was cut. Um, and there's like a funding formula. So the more successful your sport is, the more funding you get, obviously. And funding was reduced and cut completely, I think, and that has an impact when you're a minority sport that's trying to grow and reach a wider audience. You know, reach a wider grassroots player base and fan base. Having your funding disappear overnight when they actually massively increased funding between the games getting announced in London in I think 2005 and the actual Olympic Games in 2012, funding they pumped money into all these sports, and then a lot of them had their funding cut in 2012. that in itself, that's that is a problem, massive problem. But Great Britain's never really had a strong culture in the sport. Um, Other team sports, as I say, are more established, got more history, more participation, more fans, better media, deals, be it with local press, national press, be it on the radio, TV, online, social media presence, which is the modern, equivalent of radio, I would say, like YouTube channels, Twitter accounts. I mean, it would help if the British Basketball League had a bigger social media presence, and possibly stream games on YouTube, for example. That could reach a wider audience. Um, but it's not on the same level as the European equivalent leagues. It's not on the same, quality is not even at the collegiate level in the US. Um, Not even by a long shot. And we're talking about the lower grades in the US collegiate system. So I don't know where the sport goes. I mean, yeah, having the women's game qualify on a bit is great, but you want to have both the men and women like a double header or something on BBC Sport website or on YouTube or some way to reach a wider audience. Um, and that in itself, I think, is hampering. I mean, the Elite League has got a new improved deal with Premier Sports and Free Sports, so it's on a national free to air and pay per view broadcaster. Uh, you know, Amazon have bought into rugby union and football. But these are established leagues with established professional setups, with academies, with historical fan bases. I mean, um, and yeah, the problem is we have basketball fans in this country, and we have kids who play at local basketball courts, be it outdoors or indoors. Play a bit of ball, and yeah, there is a demographic that follows it. But you compare it with Australia, and the NBA is the most watched non-Australian league after the Premier League in Australia. When it comes to overseas leagues, the NBA is watched massively. It's massive in Australia, and that also goes into the funding they have for the grassroots at school and in at the professional levels, and they actually have a professional basketball league. And the best Australians, men and women, have gone to the US to play at a higher level. And it is men and women. It's reasonably good. And there's your difference. There's your difference. The NBA is the most watched overseas league in Australia. And the thing is, Australia's got some very, very good quality professional sport in the NRL, the AFL, the A League has grown massively. So domestically, they've got some really well structured and supported leagues. Um, but they do watch the NFL. They do watch the NBA. They actually play ice hockey in Australia, and there is an Australian playing in the NHL. So the fact that their best players, apart from the NRL and Aussie rules, obviously, and to a certain extent rugby union, but a lot of the best Aussies at some point have played in Europe or North America. But we watch the NBA here as well, but it's not the most popular overseas league for viewership when it comes to pay per view or free to air TV. Um, so, and I couldn't tell you what the most popular overseas league here in the UK is. No one's been very public about, like, I think the NFL, I think possibly, followed by the NBA and the NHL and Major League Baseball. The big four North American leagues do have TV deals in this country where they are accessible. And with the NFL having the London series has obviously massively, massively helped. But the NHL has been on free to air TV in this country as well. It's currently on Free Sports, where they show the odd live game, but mostly Premier Sports. I mean, at one point it was on Channel 5 in the evenings. The NFL has been on like Channel 4 and BBC. Over the years, the NBA and Major League Baseball was on Sky and BT. Um, you know, uh, the difference is our own domestic leagues. are also very, very popular for viewership. Um, our own domestic sporting competitions, and we have a very competitive TV market for those domestic leagues and viewership. Um, and we're, competing for the advertising revenue as well. And most of our professional leagues that have TV deals are on subscription TV, which is highly frustrating. It would be nice to see, some of those leagues have some free to air joint coverage. It would massively benefit um, those sports, wider audience. But we also sell TV rights of our domestic leagues overseas. The US does actually watch British ice hockey, does actually watch British Rugby League, British Rugby Union. They do watch it. Um, in the cricket, I don't know. I haven't followed any of the T20. It's not on free to air coverage, um, and I'm slowly. I've I love the sport. Don't get me wrong. I do love the sport, but I'm slowly losing my love for certain sports because of the lack of accessibility. Um, some of the crazy rule changes and the governance side of sport. And there are just certain sports that I enjoy more. Don't get me wrong, I love cricket. I would love it to be more accessible. Um, didn't watch a single game of the 100. I don't know how the 100 format did this summer. Probably not very well, considering that the Euros was a year delayed by a year, um, and got probably most of the coverage. And I've also noticed the women's rugby, they got the most views when I was doing discussing, the match reviews. They got more views than the football videos I've done recently. So obviously there is an interest in other sports. But yes, Jason Roy, I think he tore his calf. He has got some ongoing injury issues where his fitness and recovery from injuries is becoming problematic. Um, uh, whether that hampers him long term, we'll wait and see. But having ongoing injury concerns on a yearly basis, similar injuries constantly, um, it's always leg injuries that are his problem, muscular. Um, then that is a long going concern that the team doctors, be it at county level and a national level, need to look at. And he needs to work with specialists in order to improve his muscular fitness. But they're going to become more commonplace, I think, as time goes on. West Indies cricket decline. I think it has been for a while. A lot of their top players don't play for the Test side. They play the short formats, and they are mercenary players for the money, which is a massive shame because they've got some really talented players that come out of the West Indies. But yes, the West Indies Test side's been in decline for a long time. Yes, I'll be watching the Women's Euros next year. Again, I actually don't mind watching women's sport. I find it very interesting, and it's far more open, um, and it is actually kind of a fun watch. Yeah, I think a lot of their better players have gone for like the IPL and those big T20 tournaments where they get paid a lot of money, and have become mercenary players going around the world, earning their money. You can't blame them for doing it, but yeah, in the Caribbean, it has actually affected the quality of Caribbean cricket, and there's not as many good youngsters coming through. There's still a religion out there, but money has ruined it for the West Indies. They are not the team they were 20, 30 years ago when they were one of the best. I mean, Brian Lara's and Chandipols and Sarwans, um, and Ambrose, Curtly Ambroses, they're not developing them anymore. Um, I mean, India. What can you say? Possibly one of the best cricketing nations out there, with someone with the most talent depth, but too much talent sometimes, not enough squad players, too many egos. You can have a starting 11 of world class players, and they can't play as a team, and they don't get on. I'd much rather have a team of effort, character. But in cricket, when it comes to tournaments like T20 tournaments, once you get on a bit of a bad run, the confidence, the batting or the bowling just goes, or the fielding goes. And when you lose one of those components, the whole thing falls apart. So, and that defeat to Pakistan really got to them mentally. So there's obviously a lot going on there. And you could argue that delayed IPL, the disrupted IPL, and the disruption to the whole cricketing calendar in recent years may not have helped. Futsal, I've watched a bit of futsal. I've seen a bit on YouTube, especially of Ronaldinho when he's young, a young Ronaldinho, 20, 25, 25 odd years ago when he's a teenager. Um, it is highly entertaining. Um, could there eventually be like a futsal professional league, like fully professional? It's something that could definitely be explored. I know regionally in South America, they're wild for it, especially Brazil. It would be nice. Would be nice. I wonder if the West Indies will eventually break up, especially when it comes to Olympic sport. Trinidad and Tobago could feel decent. Look, Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago could definitely field their own national sides. Guyana could field its own national side as well, even though that's technically a South American country. It part of the West Indies for both football and cricket. I can't see how the West Indies can continue as a test side as is. I mean, Trinidad, Jamaica, and Guyana themselves have far bigger populations than some of the other Caribbean nations by a long stretch that play cricket. Um, I can see those three nations having their own separate national sides eventually. Um, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and Ghana they dominate the West Indies setup. And then you've got like Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, and some of the smaller islands, and Barbados, and not the Bahamas so much, ironically, but it's mostly the Windward Islands. They just don't have the player base. Um, but it's obviously a lot of politics within the West Indies cricket boards, heavily dominated by Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica and Guyana. The smaller island nations, they have less finance, smaller player base, lesser facilities. There's definitely a division between the haves and have-nots in the West Indies, and that's obviously um, affecting. And there's obviously rivalries between the West Indian nations as well. Some are, still got the Queen as head of state. Others are republics. So there's political rivalries there when it comes to funding and bits and pieces. And it's the only. I think it's a matter of time, which would be a crying shame. But those three nations could have their own test sides because they develop so many players. And yeah, Trinidad football is the second sport. Jamaica football and rugby league are growing massively, and Trinidad and Jamaica have both been to the Football World Cup, so they're got far more pedigree when it comes to team and individual sports, and Guyana is cricket mad. It's the national sport, so um, I think it's a matter of time before those three nations decide to break away from the West Indies and have their own. Because the rivalry, I think, in between the West Indies squad as well is quite. It's not the same as what it was when back in colonial days and in the early days of independence from Great Britain or the UK. There's more rivalry now. There's a lot of corruption out there, a lot of wastage of funds, and the best players come from those three nations, and that's at the detriment of those other smaller nations that make up the West Indies cricket board and the team. We don't do well in indoor arena sports. Ice hockey we do quite well. That's an indoor arena sport. Maybe there's an ice sheet. We've got a decent national setup, national program. The women's team are doing quite well. The men's team obviously doing very, very well. We've got a couple more prospects that are looking draft eligible for the NHL in years to come. To follow on from Liam Kirk. But yeah, basketball, badminton were all right. That's played indoors. But yeah, we don't have a great history in indoor sports. It's not part of our psyche. It's not part of our sporting culture, really, if I'm being honest. And that goes back to the basketball argument. It's also the availability of facilities as well. Squash and badminton, we are very decent at. We've got some great individual talents there. Commonwealth and Olympic level and on the world circuit. Um, but yeah, we don't do well at the indoor team sports. Ice hockey notwithstanding, the other ones we just not very good at. Um, and again, that comes down to the Olympic funding. Um, we handball and futsal. It comes down to funding. Um, and you know, does it need one though? I mean, how many more professional leagues can this country sustain? And you got to look at the TV money. You got to look at the media exposure. And while I agree, it would be really a lot of fun. It may actually help develop skill level for the national sides, be it men and women. Um, there is a limit where you go. How many more professional leagues can a nation support? How many more professional sports can a nation sustain? Um, that's just what I'm saying. I mean, how much sporting depth can a nation produce? Because there's a limited amount of corporate money. There's a limited amount of sponsors and facilities. There is a point where you go, eh, fine, but there is a point where you know um, there becomes market saturation, and then you're competing for another dwindling amount of sponsorship money and TV rights. Um, yeah, but that's Viv Richards. Like he's a man of his era. Sir Viv Richards. He is a man of his generation, um, and his views may not be agreeable with a lot of people. But bearing in mind, we have imported talent: Gary Balance, KP Peterson, Kevin Peterson, Ian Thorpe. We have Ben Stokes, who've been developed overseas, and how some of them. I mean, KP had no link to the UK. He just wasn't liked by the South African setup. He was very disruptive. You know, we have a history. What was his name? Tony Gregg, former England captain, was South African. But I think parentage, one of his parents was English born or something, or British born, so he was eligible. Yeah, I mean, Viv Richards, again, as I say, is a man of his generation. Same with Jeffrey Boycott. I would much rather listen to Sir Viv Richards talk about cricket than Jeffrey Boycott. At the same time, again, it's a man of his generation, regardless of his background, regardless of his nationality. He's a man of his generation. Um, I didn't know. Right, I did not know that the head coach has been suspended. This has been a terrible off season for Yorkshire. One of the most successful county cricket clubs ever. Look at our England captain, Joe Root, Yorkshire player. Former England captain, Michael Vaughan, Yorkshire player. This could have massive ramifications for not only the club level, but the domestic game. So 4-day games, you know, 1 days and T20s domestically, but also for the national side. Yorkshire has produced talent just constantly for decades. You could class Yorkshire as the Barcelona or the Bayern Munich or the Man United or the Liverpool of cricket. It is one of the most successful production lines of talent and success in the domestic game in this country. Um, that's an Australian broadcasting decision. That's not a UK broadcasting decision. He was already contracted to Fox Cricket in Australia. Um, and the Ashes is taking place in Australia. So while the BBC have pulled him from his podcast that he has with the BBC and any BBC radio coverage, he's not directly contracted by the BBC. Just remember that I think he's an independent third party. I think I don't know who his contracts with, but he's agreed on his media commitments to do the Ashes anyway. He's part of a lot of programming with Fox Cricket, which is heavily advertised, by the way, on the Fox network in Australia. He has a segment on a panel show, their version of like the NRL 360, AFL 360 on a weekly basis, um, where he's obviously over here in the UK doing it via video link. Um, we'll see what comes out. The fact that the head coach is gone, expected. That is expected. Well, he's suspended. But the fact that another players come out and well, three players now have come out and said, look, this was the culture at the team, regardless of their background. Because obviously, so what we've seen with the NHL with Chicago, with multiple allegations of various incidents, not directly related to each other, but at the time of that organisation, um, says to me that there are issues within. I wouldn't call them morons. I would say that Yorkshire does have a problem. This win at all cost mentality, where there's an arrogance, there's a lack of accountability, and if you were at your work and you made a complaint of bullying, for example, or unfair treatment, and you weren't a union member necessarily, if you were, and your complaint was reported and not taken any further, I think you would feel the same way, regardless of what your complaint is about. It does say there's a failing at Yorkshire. The fact that what I find interesting is what I find interesting is that no other county cricket club is facing similar allegations or has had similar complaints of a negative culture, player welfare, or staff complaints saying that this has happened. We have a situation, um, and is it cancel culture? No players of Indian, Sri Lankan, Bangladeshi, West Indian heritage have come out and said, "Look, we've got a problem." It's just it. I don't know. I think again, I think the fact that seven of the complaints were upheld, but I think out of 49, I find surprising. Uh, the fact that the outgoing chairman who resigned, said we're not racist, but we have a problem, is embarrassing. Shouldn't have said anything, but it does highlight structural issues within the Yorkshire County Cricket Club. It also highlights issues with the ECB as well. I don't know what the Cricket Players Union, because they obviously have a union. Every sport has a players' union where like welfare concerns are raised. What they've done, because from the sounds of it, this complaint reached the ECB 10 years ago. Um, are there any sports that I particularly dislike? I'm not a fan of baseball. I'm not a fan of basketball. I've gone off F1 completely. Um, don't get me wrong. I will watch baseball. I will watch basketball in passing. Um, if a friend wants to watch it, I'll happily watch it with them. I've got nothing against those sports. I just don't particularly like them. I don't find them engaging enough for me. I don't enjoy them. Doesn't say I dislike them. They're still valid sports. I have some concerns about the state of boxing and MMA, the way it's going. Some of these celebrity fights and some of the antics of some of the fighters and the promoters. I think boxing and MMA have a lot of issues, and kickboxing when it comes to some of the big promoters having a lot of say, and the structures, especially within boxing, where there's no unified governing body. There's multiple global governing bodies. Uh, well, look, if I don't watch basketball, I'm not really going to watch netball. It's just not. I'll probably watch field hockey, with men and women's field hockey over netball. Um, that's not to say it's a bad sport. I've got friends who've played it at school and at university, and I'm very happy that they've done very, very well. But I don't find it interesting at all. There's nothing against the female athletes who do it. We're very successful at it. We've got a great program. We've got a great professional league. It's growing. The attendance numbers are good. The media coverage is good. It's just not a sport that I find interesting. There's nothing against the sport. Fair play to them. They deserve their success, and they deserve the coverage they're getting. And the audience figures on TV are very, very good, and the crowd numbers are very, very good. It's just not a sport that I enjoy. Have I seen the England women's football team? I have watched a few games with their new head coach. They're playing better. I've seen futsal. I find it entertaining, but it's just I prefer the outdoor sports more. Ice hockey, obviously, notwithstanding, because the weather conditions also have an impact on how you play the game. Uh, Indoor, it's all climate controlled. You don't have like crosswinds. You don't have rain or snow. You don't have like extreme heat. Um, you know, Outdoor sports are more of a challenge on you physically. Um, Again, that's personal opinion. I've played indoor five-a-side football. I prefer outdoor five-a-side football. I actually prefer playing sport outside than inside. I don't know what it is, and that's again personal preference. I'm not saying I don't like indoor sports because I've watched a lot of ice hockey. I've got friends who play ice hockey. That's an indoor event, although you can have outdoor games, weather conditions permitting and facilities permitting. But I don't know what it is. I mean, I've watched handball at the Olympics. I do enjoy that. Um, we're just not very good at it. But yeah, no, I prefer the outdoor sports more than the indoor sports. And part of the reason is the weather conditions have a massive impact on how you play the game and change how you approach games and how you play games. Um, that's just my personal opinion. I played indoor cricket, and again the ball swings differently. Admittedly, you're using different equipment, slightly different equipment. It's the same basis, same principle. I've done outdoor net sessions when I was playing cricket at school, and indoor net sessions, and again, indoor net sessions, you don't get the same swing on the ball. You don't have that crosswind. You don't have a slope or an uneven pitch. Um, I know, when I was playing cricket at school, we had indoor net sessions and outdoor net sessions. I prefer the outdoor net sessions. Your lighting's different. The weather conditions do have an impact, and that's what you're going to play. You can do as much indoor training as you want, but when you are playing outdoors, crosswinds, climatic conditions, overcast conditions, for example, the lighting. Um, the, Indoor, you have a nice flat regulated surface with no cracks, no dents when it comes to cricket. And I did find, even though I wasn't the best bowler in the world, the ball swings differently. The ball reacts differently when you spin, when you do a leg break. When you're batting, the ball has a different impact off an indoor wicket or indoor surface. So when it comes onto the bat, when you actually drill through it, um, again, because it's controlled climatic conditions, um, ironically, it's cooler indoors. So the ball actually reacts with the surface and moving through the air. And when you actually hit it, ironically, the bat and the ball have a different reaction indoors than outdoors. And it does have a completely just different reaction. And so when you're actually playing outdoors, like I think you can be a bit more expansive and you can really open up your body and the way the bat and the ball react are different. What actually is netball? It's the women's version of basketball, really. It's just they developed from the same basic game. Netball was the women's version of basketball traditionally. I mean, when I was at school, it was played indoor and outdoor. Netball was better indoors. You don't want to play basketball netball in the wet outside. The ball bounces differently. Playing surface, you get puddles if it's an uneven playing surface. Netball's just netball's girl sport really, women's sport. Uh, it, I wouldn't say most British people like to watch sports in the field. It's just our sport and culture. Most of our team sports are played outdoors, um, and it is very popular in the Commonwealth. The Americans aren't very good at it. The Canadians are. It's very popular in Canada, partly because apart from CFL, most of the sports take place in winter indoors. The climate conditions, you will play a lot of sport indoors. The US doesn't seem to have a very good netball program, considering all their collegiate sports. They're not very good at it. um, Chelsea winning the league at the moment. To me, they are the favourites. Not by much, but we haven't hit the festive period yet. Let's see how they get through the Christmas, New Year period and the transfer window, and then we'll have a better idea after Christmas, after New Year's, who's still in the running. That's where Man City won the league last year. Was they just ground out wins during the Christmas period when other teams were dropping points. They were grinding out 1-0 wins. They weren't playing well. They got through, and that's where the league was won. Other teams dropped away over Christmas. But yes, it is a school which played outside. I think it's played indoors. Yeah, it's actually also a school. It is played indoors as well. It depends on the facilities, and it's better as an indoor sport. Much like basketball is better indoor. You take the weather conditions out of it. Much like cricket can't be played in the rain. I do eventually see cricket being played in indoor arenas, like the AFL has in Melbourne with Marble Stadium with a closed roof. I can see that becoming a thing to take the climatic conditions and the bad light out of play. But that will take a lot of infrastructure investment to do that. Um, but yeah, it depends on what facilities schools and colleges and universities have for playing outdoor and indoor. It's better indoor. Um, I've watched the odd game on Sky. It's not bad. Um, and I have watched it at the Olympics and the Commonwealths, and it is uh, you know a decent, especially at the Commonwealths. It's a good sport to watch. The World Championships, I've watched the odd game, and we are very good, which helps. But the Kiwis and the Aussies are very very good as well. Um, the Jamaicans are quite good. Jamaicans are scary good. Uh, yeah, Eddie. Look, uh, I haven't seen all his post-match interviews recently, but Eddie Jones and his relationship with the media, it does detract from what the team are doing and how some of the players are doing or not doing. Um, his mind games, they often they can backfire. Eddie Jones, I mean, there's links with him going back to rugby league in Australia at some point. Uh, I Sometimes it can take the pressure off the players. Sometimes it puts it back on. But Eddie Jones and his time in charge of England has been a bit of a head scratcher for me. When he was at Australia and when he was at Japan, I think the players did the talking. But since he's been, you know, uh, at the helm of England, uh, he has become well. It's almost comic genius with him, really. When he's all said and done, I think we'll look back on the Eddie Jones era and his comments in the media and go, but he's one of them when you just don't know what he's going to say. Um, you don't know what he's going to say. There's a lot of coaches like that where you're just not sure what they're going to come out with. You just don't know what's going to come out of his mouth, how controversial it's going to be. He's a bit of a character. Do England benefit from him being head coach? I mean, look, he got us to a World Cup final, and the team were beaten. I haven't seen the interview given, but obviously someone's going to put together a highlight reel of Eddie Jones's press conferences pre and post match, and it's just. I wouldn't necessarily pressure off. I think it, it motivates the other teams that England play. Um, we've seen it in the Six Nations so many times where he's coming out with this offensive in the media. talking about, the PR department at the RFU must be scratching their heads, going, "What's he going to say next?" Um, uh, but in regards to, you know, I mean, Cipriani's got an interesting background, and but again, with Eddie Jones, you just don't know what he's going to say. If, is he a bad coach? No. His track record of working with Australia as head coach, South Africa as an assistant coach, Japan as a head coach is there. Um, uh, and look, Marcus Smith is a young, talented, up and coming player that I think will be involved in the next World Cup and involved in the England setup for a long time to come, as long as he stays injury free and controversy free. Absolutely, as long as his form holds up, he could do very, very well. He needs to stay very, very grounded. This is where Danny Cipriani let himself down by not doing well off the field. He allowed off-field distractions, and his off-field behaviour was less than you know what it should have been. But a lot of England players have allowed their off-field antics to damage their on-field performances. And I was asked, "What's the biggest scandal in rugby union?" And I do think the Bath scandal with the cocaine scandal and the culture at Bath Rugby Club was bigger than the Saracen salary cap scandal, in my opinion. And Cipriani burst on the scene much like Marcus Smith, and it all went downhill because of his off-field indiscretions and his off-field behaviour and the distractions and becoming in the media spotlight because of his celebrity girlfriends. And is he shutting down the hype, or is he actually going to be, putting more pressure on the whole England setup? And this is a young player; he's a key playmaker when he's selected. And Australia's coming up. And that's a big clash, regardless of how Australia are playing or how England are playing. Form goes out the window in some of these cases. Um, and when you've got a young player in such a key position, that is a lot of pressure, regardless. I mean, I don't think Marcus Smith is getting as much hype or spotlight as, let's say, Johnny Wilkinson or Cipriani did before him, which may benefit him. But Eddie Jones is one of those coaches who will just come out with something, and you just don't know what he's going to say next. And how does that actually help or hinder the team? Everyone's got their opinion on Eddie Jones. Is Eddie Jones a bad coach? No. I mean, his track record would say, he's a very, very good coach. But whenever a young player has a breakout season or breaks into a national team, and is very young and very talented, there's going to be a lot of media spotlight. And when you're playing international level, global media are going to be looking at these young players, and they're just waiting for that young player to have a bad game. They are waiting for the young player to have a bad game. Um, and when it comes to players like Johnny Wilkinson, he very rarely had a bad game. Cipriani, however, his international career was 15 caps. That says it all. Possibly one of the best fly halves England's ever produced, but his indiscretions, his indifferent form at times, he was so hit and miss. Whereas, we've had Wilkinson, we've had Charlie Hodgson, Andy Goode, I think one of the most underrated fly halves England's ever had, and was a very solid professional. And yes, the injuries that come with Eddie Jones, you could say the same with the Australian and Japan setups as well. There was a lot of injuries within those national sides as well. There's definitely something with his training techniques. and the style of play he wants the team to play. Um, but with Africa, he was an assistant. But even then, like he's still at there were a lot of injuries that his players have sustained over the years. Um, so yeah, you have to possibly question some of his techniques and methods. Absolutely. But it's again, um, you know, uh, yeah, some question marks have to be raised about a lot of injuries being sustained by players, and I think that's a. Look, watching the women's rugby, and I will say this, and I should have mentioned it in my two reviews so far of the England women. They've got two more games against Canada and the US, and the Canada game will be, I think, a tough test as well. Canadians are a team that are playing very, very well right now, and they're the third ranked team in the world. So that will be a proper challenge, I think, for England. Is their tackle technique and their scrummaging technique and the breakdown is what it was 20 years ago in the men's. And they are getting less injuries. And yes, the physicality is different and the physiology between men and women is different, but their tackle technique is better. Their scrummaging technique is better. Um, um, and the breakdown is properly contested, and the technique at the breakdown is what the men's game has lost with just the generic size of players now. I was really impressed with the women's tackle technique and scrummaging technique. I've watched two England New Zealand tests, both of them, and the two US Canada tests. I was really impressed with the breakdown, the tackle area, the scrummaging was a lot cleaner, a lot less scrum resets, a lot less collapse scrums. And people are going to say, "Oh, it's the women's game. It's at a lower level." It is, but they've still got professional coaching setups. But they're being coached to tackle. Just if you go on the World Rugby YouTube page, you can watch the World Cup qualifiers for Ireland, Spain, Italy, and there was another nation as well in the qualifying process for the World Cup. Look at the tackle area. Look at the scrum. Look at the breakdown, the ruck, the maul. Um, the technique is better. They are being better coached. They are being better coached. And same with the US Canada games as well. They were good crowds over in Colorado. Now they're over here to play the rest of the autumn internationals. But I've been watching women's rugby for a while, and I have noticed the tackle technique is better, and the scrummaging technique. There is less collapse scrums. The scrums seem to be better policed. Um, and talking about regardless of it's the women's game. As I say, these top tier women's nations have professional coaching setups that are full time. The fact that women are semi pro or amateur or have the occasional full time contract is irrelevant, in my opinion. Looking at how they're being coached and the technique they're using for the tackle, for the scrum, there were less reset scrums. The tackle area was cleaner. I think some of them on the Sevens circuit who are on Sevens contracts are professional, but they're semi-pro. But to me, it's irrelevant of the professional or semi-pro status of the women's game or the amateur level of the women's game. The coaching setups are professional because guess what? In New Zealand, England, French, Italian, Canadian, and US setups are all professional when it comes to the coaching side of things. The coaches are full time. The women may be semi-pro or professional or amateur, that's regardless. The coaching setups are professional, so that's an all-round 12-month a year job. They will scout the opposition. But I will say this: the tackle technique is better, the scrummaging technique is better, and the breakdown is far more of a an even 50-50 contest. The amount of turnover ball and battle on and guess what, their ruck and maul technique again better. Um, and that's watching the US and Canadians as well. Far less high tackles. There were one or two incidents in both games, but far less high tackles, um, far less head contact. And I think only three players over the four games had to go for HIAs. Compare that to the men's. The tackle technique is better. Now, is that because they're less professional, or is that the coaches are going, yeah, look at the men's game, it's becoming a bit of a mess. Let's get this right. Regardless of the playing status and the level that they're playing at international level, you've still got to select players from the various clubs that they play at. You've still got, you know, to coach them. And I do think that over in North America as well with Major League Rugby, the tackle technique is better. The scrummaging technique, ironically, is better. Whether that's because the league has got a directive to try and sort it out, or World Rugby are going, right, we want to grow the game. Let's improve this. Because I've also watched, you know, the America's Nations Cup, which involves the US, Canada, Uruguay, Chile, and Brazil, and an Argentinian A team. So they're reserves basically. So we take them out there. Basically, the American Five Nations. Really, I have noticed the scrummaging. There is less reset scrums, and this is in the men's game as well. The tackle technique is better. The ruck and roll is better technique. Yes, you will have that dominant forward pack, that dominant scrum, but there's less reset scrums. So there is something going on in the European and the Southern Hemisphere nations when it's come to, you know, Argentina, South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, and the Six Nations. The tackle technique is not as good, and I'll highlight certain. It is a shame because that was a really good championship. Um, it really was. I was really enjoying that. It's massively improved the quality uh, of the Brazil side, the Chile sides. Uruguay have taken massive leaps and bounds, and they are now solidly a good, solid tier two nation that could make that step to tier one status. I believe that they are far improved over the last 5-10 years. Massive strides taken by Uruguay. Um, there's a reason why you know, and again, that's you know, US and Canada. But the best South American players are playing in the US and Canada. And you know, has Major League Rugby had an issue with that, or is that the US? I think it's the US. I think the Canadians really enjoyed that championship. It's they haven't been playing well, but I think the Canadian players, you know, because it was the Pacific Nations Championship with the US and Canada in it for a long time, and they pulled out that during the American Nations Championship. And if that is no longer a thing, then that is a massive. I didn't see the full game. Oh, don't ruin it for me. You've ruined it for me. But Spain played Fiji, and I think at half time it was 13-12. So the Fijians, I'm not so. But again, these are all World Cup, you know, mid World Cup cycle. You know, you've got to play your internationals, play your games. And the Uruguays, yeah, they've still got a very good setup. And Romania have got a good professional level. They're going through a bit of a down patch, but the Romanians have always had a very. The first Romanian try is brilliant. It doesn't take very long, and that outside centre is an absolute animal. That first Romanian try, I did watch the first half. It was a brutal game, and the Romanians do have some really good players. Um, And the Uruguayans are professional as well. A lot of them playing in Major League Rugby, and there's a fair few playing in Europe as well. And I think some have played for the Jaguares in the old Super Rugby format. So the Uruguayans have got a lot playing in Europe, a lot playing in Major League Rugby, and they're taking massive steps with having more professional based players. And I think at home as well, Uruguayan domestic game is improving. Um, so we'll see. The fact that USA have got to have a playoff, a two-game playoff against Chile, um, and the Canadians not qualifying, I think not having the American Nations Championship has actually harmed both the USA and Canada. Because the Canadians, Uruguay have qualified. Canadians haven't. They're out. And the US have got to play off against Chile, who I think beat Brazil in their previous qualifier. So if the US lose against Chile, which is possible because the Uruguayans battered them in all facets, just were better overall and actually battered them. If we're being honest, and I am being honest because I watched those two games, the US were just not on the same level. Um, yes, you've got Major League Rugby, but yeah, you've got the best players from South America outside of Argentina. Plus, you've got the US and Canadian setup, but then you've got a lot of European and South African and Australian, New Zealand players who because they produce so many players, they're not going to make it. There's not enough roster spots available for the professional game. They need to get they want to keep playing, and Major League Rugby is expanding. So, does that help or hinder? How many? Because it's the same with the same argument with the NHL with the European players being drafted and coming into the league. Does that help or hinder the Canadians and the US? Less Canadian players now as a percentage of playing in the NHL now than 20 years ago. The percentage of US players has risen, as has the percentage of European players has risen and has been constantly rising since the 70s. So does that help or hinder the Canadians and the US? They're still the two best nations in the world, in my opinion. But a lot of the European nations have won the World Championships, and that's the defining marker is the World Championships and the Olympics. The Canadians aren't as dominant as they used to be. Neither are the Russians, the former Soviets, obviously as dominant as they used to be, and the US. Um, they've got far greater player depth now than they did before. And with the majority of the NHL teams being based in the US, so Major League Rugby, I do think, Uruguay have shown that in recent times they're better than Canada and they're better than the US. And there's a reason why they've already qualified for the World Cup in the head-to-head. The US going into that, you would think have more registered players and a professional league, and the Uruguayans, their best players, play in Europe and play in Major League Rugby, and they beat them. They beat them, and the growth of the game in Uruguay is therefore to see. They are the second best South American nation after Argentina, and they have beaten Argentina in the past, back in the day. So they're a solid tier 2 nation. Chile have taken massive steps in the last 10 years, same with Brazil. And I think Brazil hosting the Olympics with the Sevens, they've taken that step. And while the Brazilians haven't, obviously, again you got the growth of the professional game in South America, but the best Uruguayans are playing in North America and Europe. And guess what? They're putting themselves in the shop window by qualifying for the World Cup earlier than last time, and they beat Fiji in the World Cup 2 years ago, which was their, I think their third win in the World Cup, their first for many, many years. But yeah, the tier 2 status of the European game, like Spain, Georgia, Romania, the Russians, behind the Six Nations is stronger than the US and Canada. The Canadians have really declined in the last 15 years, massively declined. I mean, and that's a problem that the Canadian Union need to look at. They do, but the best Canadian players don't play in the Major League Rugby. They're playing in Europe, and they're scattered around, the various leagues. And the Toronto Arrows, being the only professional Canadian side in Major League Rugby is something that needs to be looked at. You could have teams, but they are competing against the CFL, and how does that work out? It's interesting. You're also competing against the MLS when the Major League Rugby is played as well. And the Canadian teams in the MLS are actually reasonably successful and have solid foundations. But yeah, I think the USA are far behind Tier 1 standard. Absolutely. Um, yeah, the Canadian national side is in a terrible state and has been for about the last 5 years. Has been declining. Um, Uruguay are better than them. The USA are now on the head-to-head still worse off. Canada, USA, the Canadians have got a better head-to-head in both men's and women's. Um, combined. And Canadian women have dominated the women, US women. In the last 6 tests, they've won. No, the last 7 tests, they've won 6, lost 1. So the head-to-head, the Canadians are better in the women's game. And traditionally in the men's, the head-to-head is in favour of Canada, but in recent years, the US have overtaken Canada. Uruguay, I think, are now the best of the North and South Americans, other than Argentina. They're a step ahead. Um, they're just better. In the last 5 years, Chile have caught up and overtaken the Canadians. Brazil have beaten the US and Canada in the America's Nations Cup, which I do hope returns. Um, I do hope that returns. I think COVID's why it's been suspended. It hasn't, I think, totally gone away. I think it will return. I think next year. But Brazil have beaten Canada and the US. I think last year or the year before, in the build up to the World Cup, the Brazilians beat both Canada and the US. So there are warning signs there that although we've got Major League Rugby and it's massively expanding, and in the long term, I think that benefits the US national side and hopefully the Canadian national side. The South American nations, I think, are benefiting more because while they've got smaller player bases, getting as many of their players into professional contracts as possible, um, and that's getting more eyes on them, is benefiting them. Portugal, as a tier 2 nation, or benefited from the Sevens program and their domestic league, while it's still semi-professional like the Spanish. Some of their best players are being scouted by the French league, um, and there's your answer. Uh, the European game is at a better. The Germans are pretty decent as a tier 3 nation as well. Um, they're pretty solid. Well, it doesn't. It doesn't because that's then down to the coaching setup, and I would say select players on form rather than the team they play for. And as the game grows and there's more players available for selecting, it improves the depth and it improves the competitiveness. But you don't want the Major League Rugby expanding too quickly. You want it to stabilise a little bit. So it's a difficult one. It's a difficult one. If you could sign 3 realistic players for Newcastle in January, who would they be? I'm not going to go for names, but you need a centre back, you need a centre midfielder, and you need another striker. So they're going to have to look either in Europe or in the Premier League and see if they can get get some players. I don't think any Premier League clubs are going to be willing to give up a centre back, a defender, a centre back, a central midfielder, and a striker. So they might have to look to the European leagues to get a player. They might be able to find a centre back who may be unsettled or unhappy at the team they're at. Um, there are quite a few players playing in the Championship who I think could play at the Premier League level. Um, but it is what it is. We like England players playing in the Rugby Championship. I don't think you're doing. Do you watch any of the European cricket stuff a few months ago and ended up winning it in the end? But most of these teams were of Indians. No, I didn't. If it would be like England players playing African. I don't think so. Major League Rugby is professional, so that's improving their fitness, their diet, their recovery, their training full time. But then it comes down to the national setup. So they need to obviously they're playing against nations at their own level, which is tier 2 and tier 3. Um, they've now got a professional league set up, which is great. But they need to be playing against tier 2 European nations like Romania, like Georgia, like Spain, like Portugal, as well as Uruguay are clearly better than them. Chile, I think, are about equal. And it'll be interesting to see how that head-to-head goes for the World Cup qualification. If the USA don't qualify like Canada, that'll be a huge blow. But it's very similar when the USA didn't qualify for the last Football World Cup. So there needs to be an assessment of stabilising Major League Rugby. But when it comes to the internationals, I do think bringing the America's Nations Championship, I think, has um, benefited the quality and improved the quality of the South American teams massively. The Pacific nations, I would actually say bring the Pacific Nations Cup back. Uh, Japan, I think, are far superior to the US right now by a long way. Um, Tonga, Fiji, and Samoa, they go through ups and downs. Tonga, I think, are the strongest of the Pacific nations. But look at that recent battering by England. I would say get Japan in to like a tri-nations type, USA, Canada, Japan. Japan would dominate that right now, and they are basically a tier one nation at this point. But that, I think, playing them regularly, so you're playing that higher ranked team. If you can get that win occasion, that can boost confidence. Um, at the same time, Chile and Uruguay and Brazil have proved that they can not only compete with but beat USA and Canada, the more established rugby nations. I think Uruguay are the most established in the South Americans, apart from Argentina. But it's hard to judge where they're at. If they lose to Chile, they're in trouble. If they beat Chile or on the aggregate score in the playoff, that's different. But if they lose, they're done. They are out of World Cup qualification, like Canada. And then, yeah, then questions have to be asked: how many overseas players do you have in Major League Rugby? Should you have an overseas player cap? Um, then that raises questions over stabilising Major Rugby and keeping it stable for a couple of years and then allowing this expansion to stabilise and then working with to build the quality, because the women's game is going from strength to strength over in the US and Canada, and the Canadian women are really good, like really scary good in comparison. Um, you know, the Canadian women, yeah, they have an outside chance of beating. They have a chance of beating England this weekend. They really do. They've got a brilliant defence. They're very very well coached, and I think most of them play in England. So uh, this Canadian side are dangerous, um, and yeah, they are really well coached, well drilled. And when they were down to 14 players for 18 minutes, they actually scored points and didn't concede any against the US women. So read into that what you want. Um, and that was a brutal 2-game series, and the Canadians came out on top. And in the second game, for 18 minutes, they were down to 14 players, and yeah, they won, and they scored points whilst down to 14 against an equal comparable side. Uh, uh, and yeah, they were better. Um, they do. The Canadian men's football team, I think, has massively improved. Um, and having several teams in the MLS and successful teams will help with that. Um, um, but yeah, I think the US and Canadian women are really, yeah, uh, definitely, in my opinion. I don't know what it is, except ice hockey. I would think, uh, even in ice hockey, they're about comparable to the US and Canadian men's teams. But it's the infrastructure. There's been a massive explosion of participation at university. They've been a driving force behind the growth of both football and rugby in North America. There's no doubt on that. Um, but I think we'll we'll see if that strength can continue. And I think a good litmus test in the rugby will be Canada, England at the weekends. Yeah, the NCAA program, the women's programs have massively improved. Um, but the collegiate programs in the US have been producing high quality athletes for decades because of their Olympic programs. Just decades, absolute decades, which is borne out in the medal tables. You know, the US is the most dominant Olympic nation post World War II. So that just tells you all you need to know for medals attained. How long that remains to be seen. How long that remains, time will tell. But very, very interesting in that regard. Very, very interesting. Now, going back to do I think Adrian Lewis playing his best darts again? I don't follow darts anymore. I used to, but I I really tuned out a long time ago, um, which is a shame. I used to love watching darts, but I've tuned out of darts. I don't follow it anymore. I stopped enjoying it in my mid 20s. I think the last time I watched darts was in my mid 20s. So that's been 7 odd years ago since I really last watched the old darts. Right, let's because obviously this was mentioned that Yorkshire suspended their head coach Gale. Let's have a look. So, club suspend coach Andrew Gale for a tweet he sent in 2010. He became coach in 2016. So this is getting interesting. So, Yorkshire head coach Andrew Gale has been suspended as part of an investigation of social media content back in 2010. The Jewish News. Oh, it had to be a ethnic minority newspaper. Oh, this is going to be interesting. Reported Gale, then club captain, so he was obviously playing at the time, sent a now deleted tweet containing an anti-Semitic slur to former Leeds United head of media Paul Dew. Oh God! So it involves two sports. So he sent basically, if this was back in the day, it's been an email, most like a joke over email to former Leeds United head of media Paul Dews. In a statement, the club said Gale, who's 37, is currently suspended pending a disciplinary hearing and will make a further statement once the process. But this doesn't look good considering what's happening with the scandal currently in golfing. So it is actually technically linked currently. And obviously he was playing at the time when Rafiq was making his allegations. So this shows a lot of problems that the clubs had for a long time. Gale told Jewish News he was completely unaware of the offensive nature of the term and deleted the tweet as soon as it was made aware. So he made 156 first-class appearances for the club, and he took up the coaching role. The club has also confirmed Martin Moxon, their director of cricket, is absent from work because of a stress-related illness and will be given the necessary support. So he's basically gone, I pretend I'm mentally ill so I can get some time off. It's the latest development in a string of racism allegations concerning the club. Earlier on Tuesday, the UK government said it would ready to step in if Yorkshire and the England Wales ECB do not take real action following the Rafiq scandal, which has now engulfed the coach. A report found former Yorkshire player Rafiq was a victim of racial harassment and bullying, but the county said it would not discipline anyone. Yet their head coach is suspended for a racial slur he made about a different minority group. Oh dear. Mm. But bear in mind, this sort of scandal's been going on for over a year since the first allegation, was made, made publicly. So obviously the complaint's been made internally a long time ago, and no action was taken. So the chairman Roger Hutton's gone. So a new chairman Patel's come in. Ex-academy player Ifran Amjad said he had abuse when he was 16, and Ul Hassan. So that's three players plus an ex-player has been pulled up, who's current coach for what is classed as a racial slur. Sod what? Um, sod. Well, this is what I mean. Like, if you're getting crap, you're going to give crap back. Does it excuse it? No. But the fact that the coach, who was a player at the time, sent back, yeah, it would be amazing if we go back through old emails and letters and phone calls and text messages that were sent between people 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. I'm sure we could get loads of people in various positions sacked and suspended. How far back do you go? Is there like this is an 11-year-old piece of social media, um, but it does highlight issues that Yorkshire have. Now, whether these players are good or bad at what they do is irrelevant. But I do refer to what's going on at the Chicago Blackhawks with the abuse scandal and the racism scandal that involved Akeem Alou, who was physically and racially assaulted by a coach who ended up coaching another team and ended up getting sacked 2 years ago. Um, it does highlight that complaints were raised, regardless of the incident. Complaints were raised of inappropriate behaviour. Best way to put it. Regard, regardless of what the allegation is. So I'm talking about player welfare and complaints process and staff welfare as well. Take the incident and just use the context. If this was to happen in your workplace, if you were to be bullied, harassed, felt safety was an issue, okay, and you make a complaint to management, you will go, look, I think something's not right here, regardless what it is. Okay, regardless of what the incident is, be it a workplace incident regarding safety, health, whatever, racism, sexual harassment, sexism, bullying, whatever it may be, right? If that was happening in your workplace, I do stress this, and you go to your union rep, so in this case the players' union, or you go to your HR, your manager, you say, look, I'm having a problem. What was if the person you have to report to about this problem, so HR management, is the person bullying you? What do you do then? The fact that the ECB were aware, much like the NHL and the NHLPA were aware of what was happening in Chicago all those years ago. Um, it is it though? Is it going too far? Because what happens if, let's say, if those players were physically assaulted, for example? I think I'm being pragmatic here. Put yourself in that player's shoes. What happens if that happens in your workplace? Let's say you're not getting, because of your gender, your sexuality, you're not you're being treated differently. You're being bullied, picked on. When I use these terms, like you're always being given the shitty tasks to do, while other members of your team are not. You're the one being singled out for specific treatment. Um, well, I don't know. I mean, it is subjective, and again, I do link this and make parallels to what's happening with the abuse scandal that involved the US gymnastics, the British cycling report, the NHL with the Chicago Blackhawks, um, the what other sports scandals have there been where there's been systematic failings? I would also link this to like the NRL and AFL steroid scandals where players were being given supplements that they weren't even sure were in them. So that's their health, that's their well-being. And all this happens around 2010. There was something going on in professional and Olympic sport in about 2010 that's coming out now that wasn't good enough. And itchy nose. Bloody, I hate this time of year. Oh, I get itchy nose. But there were clearly failings by Yorkshire Cricket Club, County Cricket Club. There were failings by the ECB in this case. And it is interesting that this one particular cricket club. Well, this is what I mean. Like, but complaints were raised by athletes, other staff, their families, that something was going on, and the governing body and the organisation that was meant to be, coaching them, looking after them, failed them. And it's the same in the NHL. It's the same in British cycling. It's the same in the NRL with the peptide scandal and the AFL with the peptide scandal, where players were thrown under the bus, given suspensions, when actually we didn't even know what was being put into our bodies, getting banned, not being looked after, um, left the sport altogether. If it doesn't matter what the problem is, but complaint clearly we're going back to 2008, and these complaints are on the record, and no action was taken. And the fact that Yorkshire County Cricket have said no one's going to be suspended, yet now they've suspended their head coach for a similar racial slur over a similar incident involving how you know, in my opinion, the culture within that cricket club is the problem. It doesn't matter its race, it could be sexism, it could be homophobia, it could be just bullying, whatever. The fact that multiple individuals have raised concerns within the structures of that cricket club saying, I don't agree with what's going on. Same with the NHL with the Chicago Blackhawks, where multiple individuals raised concerns with management and then they weren't followed up on, which then allowed that individual to commit heinous crimes later on, has drawn a lot of criticism. And heads have rolled. Now it's getting in. Now we're going on to the grooming games. Please don't, because again the media has spun that to create a moral panic. Is there a society issue within a subsection of the Pakistani community? Yes, but yeah, for some reason Yorkshire does have a problem. Especially, we're discussing the cricket team right now. There is an issue within the structures of that organisation. Now, what is interesting is none of the other counties in the top flight, so the top two divisions or the lower levels, have raised these issues. And yeah, the issue with what happened at Hillsborough in '89. I'm not getting down this division route. I'm not. I'm not going down this route of blaming one minority group over another minority. We're all British at the end of the day. If you've got a British passport, you're British to me. I don't give a toss about the colour of skin, your sexual orientation, or your political outlook. You're all British to me. This is what the media want, and the political parties want. They want us dividing and arguing with each other rather than unifying against them. Keep the people divided. Divide and rule. That's how it works. But what I was getting at, for some reason, now I'm not seeing this in other sporting organisations within Yorkshire, but the cricket. That's a different one for me. There's definitely problems within that setup that have been long-standing, and it does run deep within that cricket club. And it's the same with the Chicago Blackhawks in the NHL. The rot does run deep. Well, words are one thing. It's when it gets physical and nasty, then it's something else. And when you've got high-ranking public officials getting involved, be it members of parliament in this case, yes, safe standing. As long as there's the seating around it, I don't see a problem where you can sit back down again if you want to. The old standing, the old terraces, you couldn't sit back down, and you ended up getting penned in with a metal cage. It's great for I think younger fans, because the way it's, you can sometimes when you're sitting down when you've got a big lump in front of you, you can't see, so you want to stand up, and the guy behind goes, "Fucking sit down, shut up, geriatric. You had your time when you had say standing." Um, Astro World, that's a music festival. There's something to discuss on the other channel. Crowd crushes do happen. That's a concern I do have with the standing. However, we've had safe standing in League One and League Two and the non-league. They've never been told to have all-seater stadiums, but if you play in the Championship and Premiership, you've got to have an all-seater stadium. That's been the case since 1994. It came out as a recommendation after the Hillsborough report. So since '94, if you play in the Championship, that's why Vicarage Road had that section that had no development and was vacant for a long time. It's 'cause it was the old terrace that they didn't have enough, they didn't redevelop. Now they have. The safe standing, Astroworld, that is to do with the music festival. That is different to a venue that's been used all year round as a sports stadium. They're doing some trials. Celtic had a successful trial, and of course, League One and League Two, we saw at the FA Cup at the weekend safe standing areas that have been in place since 1994. But they have to have a non-foldable seating behind where you can sit down if you so wish. So that does limit how many people can be in each row, which is what the old terraces didn't have. You just packed them in like cattle. I think safe standing will be. I think safe standing will be, with some modifications. I think will come into force. I think fans want it, and I think with the way the trials are going and looking at the safe standing areas that we have in League One and League Two, you have to have that seat behind. So I can see it working. We've seen it in other sports venues, like rugby union, rugby league for a long time, but we haven't had the crowd problems that we've had in football. So again, can the fans behave to make it work? And what would be the pricing for safe standing areas be over normal seating areas? Um, Bradford Bulls, well, look at their financial issues. Again, Yorkshire, yeah, you could say that. You could say that. I think sport in Yorkshire has a problem. Um, the Bradford Bulls situation, I will look into what happened with the Bradford Bulls, their fall from grace, and the mess that they're in. Let's not have alcohol back in stadiums, please. I'd rather we didn't kill each other. Christ. The ban on alcohol at football is a fair ban. I don't know why they're trying to get rid of that in Scotland because their fans can't behave sober, let alone pissed. Being generous with Scottish fans, and I've got a lot of Scottish subscribers and viewers. I love you guys, but let's not give the hooligan minority any more fuel, please. They're bad enough. Sober, let alone pissed north of the border. And Scottish football fans have a huge minority with the sectarianism and disorder at games. And it's not just Celtic and Rangers, Aberdeen, Hibs, Hearts, Motherwell, Partick, all of them have got a bad reputation, really embarrassing reputation. Both domestically and in Europe, it's embarrassing. Let's not add alcohol to the mix, please. Uh, but yeah, Bradford Bulls, what happened there with the finances, and the state of the stadium and the fact the RFL got involved is just not good at all. I don't think the Astro World will have the repercussions on the sport, but for music festivals and outdoor carnivals and political rallies, yes. But that's an American situation. That's not a repercussion here because it didn't happen in the UK. It happened in the US, so that's a different jurisdiction and a different set of laws and governance when it comes to outdoor and indoor events and large public gatherings and all that. Oh look, we've already got sectarianism in some major urban areas between Christians and Muslims and Jews and all that. Let's not add alcohol and other shit to the mix, and let's keep the politics off the channel. where it doesn't impact on sport, please. That's for the other channel. But when it comes to football, yeah, I had to actually explain to a rather upper class Scottish gent that sectarianism is rife in Scotland outside of Glasgow, and Rangers and Celtic. And he didn't believe me. And I said, mate, you say you're a Hearts fan or a Hibs fan. He said, I'm a Hibs fan. I was like, and you don't believe there's sectarianism with Hibs and Hearts? Are you smoking crack? He didn't believe me, and I had to educate him, and it was really embarrassing. But one of my old work colleagues, who's a Tottenham fan, one of our drivers was a Rangers fan, and he put on some sectarian music in the cab. I had to educate a grown adult who's in his mid-20s, who's a parent with two kids, about sectarianism. I had to educate a guy in his mid-20s who's a parent about sectarianism in football. And the historical, links, and I just couldn't believe it. I was absolutely stunned. I could not believe it that I had to teach a guy who's a Tottenham fan about religious hatred in football, considering the whole Tottenham, Arsenal, that kind of calling themselves the Yids, which is an offensive term. I had to educate a guy on sectarianism in football. It just stunned me, absolutely stunned me. And as someone who's got links to Ireland, with my dad's service in the military and with friends from north and south, the fact that I had to teach a grown man about sectarianism just depressed me. It did. It did. Yes, absolutely. Hate is taught. Uh, you're not born for the hate you're taught. Yeah, the scars in our society go back a long way. In Scotland, they do. The rest of the UK, I think, yes, because there actually are issues within some of the big cities that have large Catholic denominations, like Liverpool, Manchester, Birmingham, London, where in working class neighbourhoods, in the not too distant past, there were some rather nasty incidents, and it does involve football. So yes, I do believe that there needs to be, but that's the education system, and again, that's a conversation for the other channel. But I know in Scotland they have to teach that in their education system. Should it apply to the rest of the UK? Absolutely. And I think in Northern Ireland as well, they have strict rules in education and religious schools and mixed schools in certain areas. So in the rest of the UK, England, Wales, I think yes, that should be on the curriculum on the social studies. Absolutely. Because in football, it's there, and Celtic and Liverpool have links. Rangers and Chelsea have links. I don't know about the Edinburgh clubs and south of the border, but I know Celtic and Rangers have links with Liverpool and Chelsea, and it gets quite nasty when games are on. And I remember watching Celtic Liverpool in I think it was a UEFA Cup match, and there are I personally I agree that there should be more education. But look, I left school when I was 16. I had no issues at school in regards to we had a lot of Catholics and we had a lot of Protestants, and there was no issue. We had lads from Ireland, Scotland. We had no issue there when it came to chapel services and stuff at boarding school. But and we had people of other faiths as well. In my opinion, though, we weren't taught it, like modern sectarianism. We were taught about obviously the wars of religion and history and religious education, the differences in the dominations of Christianity, but we weren't taught about the social issues of the troubles and the working class issues on the street in the big urban areas. We weren't taught it, and that is in living memory for a lot of people. A lot of people. And when it links into sport, yes, Celtic and Rangers in their time have had partial stadium closures and fines from UEFA for their fans misbehaving in Europe. So when Rangers are playing, let's say in Poland or in the Czech Republic, for example, and vice versa with Celtic, they have had UEFA bans and partial stadium closures and fines from UEFA, and they keep doing it. And it doesn't matter if it's in the Europa League or Champions League, in the qualification stages or the group stages or knockout stages. It's an ongoing issue that Rangers and Celtic have constantly faced partial stadium closures for sectarian chanting and sectarian banners and sectarian-based violence. And it's an ongoing issue that isn't going away, and it's there. And the rest of the Scottish clubs as well have had incidents at games, and again, it's something that isn't going away. And UEFA have punished, and the Scottish FA have punished clubs, not just Rangers and Celtic, but all clubs at some point have been punished for some rather untasteful and nasty incidents in the Scottish league system, and when they're playing in Europe for fans misbehaving uh, at games at club level. I don't know about when it gets to the Scotland national side, but it's an ongoing issue that hasn't gone away, and unfortunately is on the rise, and in recent times as well. So there's definitely ongoing issues there north of the border in recent years, and you know I don't know what you do about that. But it's an interesting question. I think when it links to sport as well, I think sport should be a unifier, not a divider. And unfortunately, football seems to have a lot of issues, and right now, cricket's got a lot of problems as well. Um, and sport's got to face this head on. Um, and the way Yorkshire obviously dealt with the situation uh, leaves a lot to be desired. And it's now the head coach is suspended pending investigation. So I mean, Yorkshire's in trouble. How that impacts on the England national side and Yorkshire next season, we'll wait and see. I think there's going to be a lot of repercussions to come um, out of that situation going forward, um, and the reputational damage to that team and that club is going to take a very long time to fix, and it won't happen overnight. And I think more heads will roll. I think this scandal will keep going on, and then I think more will come out, and it could honestly impact on England long term, and other counties in the England cricket system will have to look at their procedures they have in place. Um, I would I wouldn't go that far. I think players like Moeen Ali have proven. He's a Warwickshire player. And Mark Ramprakash, when he was playing, I think was it Middlesex, that players of Asian origin definitely have a part in the England setup. And Jofra Archer, I mean, yes, he's from I think Bermuda, but um, they're world class players, and were world class players. So I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is within the setup within Yorkshire. I think that's a Yorkshire specific problem. I have no problem with a player of Indian or Pakistani or Bangladeshi or West Indian heritage playing for England, not at all. Um, mm, that doesn't bother me as long as the players are good enough to play. Their background does not bother me one jot. I don't care if they're white, they're black, they're Asian, they're gay, they're straight. As long as they're good enough to play and have proven they're good enough to play, that's all I care about. I don't care. I'm colorblind. Well, I'm not actually colorblind, but I'm colorblind when it comes to the color of a person's skin. It doesn't bother me. What bothers me is Oh, well, look, this is what South Africa is faced with the quota system, positive and negative discrimination. I think if you're good enough to play, you're good enough to play regardless of your background. And South Africa's been facing this problem since 1995 with the quota system, both in rugby and in cricket, um, and ironically in football as well. I don't think we should have a quota system. I generally think that the issue within Yorkshire is yeah, there is possibly a rate. We'll have to see what all comes out in the end. But they did uphold 7 complaints. 7 complaints were upheld. So that says to me that there is a problem within the Yorkshire County Cricket Club, regardless of the quality of player. Um, that there is a problem there. It would be the same if, like, a player had been physically assaulted by a coach, regardless of if he's playing well or badly or what. Um, I've got no problem. What I have a problem is when we have the plastic players like Kevin Peterson playing for England, who've got no links to England through a parent or a grandparent, or you know, he wasn't wanted by the South Africa setup. He was a disruptive influence, and the South Africans had enough of it. What? Why? Because he's a plastic player. Kevin Peterson. He had no. I was never a fan of KP, and I Gary Balance as well, and all that. Yeah, but he was never born here, never lived here, and he fell out with the South African setup and ended up over it. And then I think in the end we regretted taking him. He was one of the worst England captains we've ever had. But again, international selection rules. Oh, you've got a grandparent or a parent. I don't care if his mother was English. He was an arrogant cunt. I never liked him. I've met him. He's a cunt. Plain and simple. He's a bastard. He's a wanker. He's an arsehole. It matters to me because he never lived here. He only got here because his mum goes, "Oh yeah, get a passport." Never lived here until he suddenly became eligible for selection. He's also half a twat. But these Yorkshire players were born and raised here, but apparently, yeah. No, this is where I have an issue. There is too many loopholes in the international selection where you don't necessarily have to live in the country, but if one of your parents 30 years ago lived here and then went over to another country and you were born, you can suddenly come back and play. I don't give a toss that he's half English. He's a massive wanker. The South Africans didn't want him. He was brought up and raised and played his youth cricket in South Africa, and then he became a pain in the arse in the domestic game in South Africa, so they got rid of him. He ended up over here. Is he a talented player? At times. Was he a big disruptive influence who then basically threw his teammates under the bus in his biography? Yep. Did his teammates like playing with him? Nope. Was he a good captain? Nope. Was he an absolute arrogant arsehole? Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I, that's where I have an issue is when a player is developed by another nation, regardless of their heritage, and then they go, oh, but I've got a parent or a grandparent, oh, therefore I must apply. We've had the same argument in rugby league, we've had the same argument in rugby union, we're now having the same arguments in football, where you can get residency or you've got that tenuous link with the parent or grandparent, but you've got no actual development in this country. Same with Australia, where they're just paying rugby league players massive salaries to come over from rugby league when they're actually Fijian, Tongan, Samoan, Cook Islander, and they're going, but you played rugby league in the NRL, so you got the residency, even though you were your heritage. Again, it's the same with Ben Stokes. He was brought up and raised in New Zealand until a certain age. At what point do you go? You played your youth level. At what point do you go? Well, when do you go? Okay, this is a point where you've got to be developed up to a certain age. So you're more than happy for a white emigrate to come and play, but not an Asian emigrate to come and play. Is that what you're saying? Because from what I'm seeing, Jason Roy is injury prone all the time, like chronically. Um, Yeah, Andrew Strauss was he's now involved with the ECB, and look where the ECB's got. Straussy, yeah. Andrew Strauss. At what point do you go? At what point do you stop playing your youth level at one country and then come play in another country? Because this is where the international selection is a bit of a mess, and it's the same with rugby union, rugby league, football to a point now where Declan Rice flip flopped, Diego Costa flip flopped, Laporte in football's flip flopped. Yeah, international selection rules. There's too many loopholes where you either have these project players who get residency and you can qualify, or oh god, for someone who's got an English flag and has right wing views, it really interests me. Really interests me. It does. For me, the international selection rules. At what point does a youth player who's been developed by another youth system? So I'm going to use the Declan Rice situation because he played for Ireland. Or what do you mean? What am I talking about? International selection rules. No, because Black South Africans have moved here as well. I've got South African mates who are white, black, and mixed race. That is BS. No one's forcing them to leave. They're leaving of their own accord, partly because of economic reasons. Look at the French national side. Half their team is bloody foreign. Never born or raised in France. Got no links with France. Crikey, if you look at the French national side, I mean, Christ, Africa won the World Cup. But you're not saying what a mixed race South African who comes up. I've got a friend who's hard mixed race Zimbabwean, white and black. His parents were born in Zimbabwe. He's over here. Should he have a right to play for England then? He's still got his Zimbabwean passport. And then we're opening a whole Pandora's box then when it comes to international selection rules. Because I'm using other sports as examples. It doesn't matter when the kid comes here, does he play his youth level? At what point did he stop playing his youth level? At what point does that become a rule? We're seeing it in rugby league. We're seeing it in rugby union. So the Tuolangi, for example, in rugby union, all his brothers play for Samoa. What was there was a US player who ended up playing for England in rugby union, retired recently from New York. But you've constantly said white, 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 and replaced them with crap minority players, like the quota system. Gary Balance is another one. Yeah, Raheem Sterling plays for England. He could play for Jamaica, but he was born here. Parents may not have been. They may be Windrush, but he was born and developed here. The entirety. Jason Roy, he might have come here at 11, but he was still playing at some form. Nah, 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 I don't agree with you. I don't agree with you. I'm sorry. Kevin Peterson was developed by the South African system. They didn't want him anymore, so he chose to play for us. Ian Thorpe was developed by the Zimbabwean system, chose to play for us. You constantly have to bring race into it. You do. Because of what's happening at Yorkshire, you're saying the Pakistani players who were racially abused used the race card when actually they were racially abused and there is a culture issue at Yorkshire. Sorry, you're way off it for me. Possibly. They might have been actually ignored because of their race. They raised complaints about racial slurs aimed at them and no action was taken. That to me says that there is institutional racism at the Yorkshire Cricket Club. It's got nothing to do with their quality. You are saying it's because they're crap players. When they have raised concerns, you blatantly are. You're saying that they're crap players. Yes, maybe they are. All three of them are from the same minority background. All three of them raised concerns with management, saying that they were subjected to racial abuse by other members of that squad and management, and no fucking action was taken. Why am I in Russia? Because they're good. Moeen Ali plays for Warwickshire, and Rashid is a brilliant spinner. I've got no issue with them playing. Actually, Moeen Ali at Test level is a bit crap, but he kept getting selected. It's got nothing to do with their quality. Nothing. Nothing. I've got Zimbabwean mates, white and black and coloured. It's got nothing to do with the quality level of those players. They raised concerns about the racial abuse they were facing and the bullying they were facing, and they weren't taken seriously. And when we're getting on about selection rules of players coming over who've played and been developed by other countries, there's a massive loophole in the selection rules. So don't say I'm way off on this. This is an abuse of the system. The fact what's happening at Yorkshire, and this is what's pissing me off because I don't think you're listening, is forget the quality level of the player. They said that they were ignored in their complaints, which they took to higher levels, and nothing was done. Nothing was done. Well, you've actually constantly posted regular white right-wing views on this channel of a right-leaning nature. I try and keep colourblind. And if I was to go back through all your comments you have posted in the history of this channel, you have got right-wing leaning views on both channels. But you're still welcome on this channel. I'm just disagreeing with you at this point. You're saying because the players are crap that they pulled the race card. I'm not agreeing with you on that. What I'm saying is 7 of the complaints by Rashid or by Rafiq were upheld. Seriously, I'm going to go back through some of your comments. You made references to the Pakistani. You're not right. Most sexual abuse in this fucking country happens from white people. The fact that you made reference to some sex grooming gangs that happen to operate in the north of England and have been found guilty, yes, that is a concern. It is a concern. There is a minority in the Pakistani English community or British community that has a problem. It doesn't make you right. Doesn't make you right. I have a difference of opinion when it comes to the Yorkshire racism scandal. Don't wow me. I have a difference of opinion when it comes to the Yorkshire racism scandal. And if you look at the history of fucking comments on this channel, which I've allowed you to get away with and not actually taken down, you have actually made some pretty borderline comments that I've allowed to stand. I've even made you a fucking moderator. You mentioned it in the past. And I've got fucking 4 years worth of live streams where I can go through and I can read every single fucking comment. So before you even get going at me, you're lucky you're still a. I'm not fucking virtue signalling. If I'm fucking virtue signalling, I'll be a fucking Labour supporter. But I ain't. I fucking hate the Labour Party. I think they're fucking cunts. You said that. You said they pulled the race card and you would rather have white players playing earlier in this stream. So if you're calling me a fucking virtue signaller, fuck off the channel then. There's a lot of things I don't agree with you saying. The West Yorkshire Police, yes, you did mention Chester. Thank you very much. I can go scroll back through the last 2 hours of this live stream and I can pull up your fucking comment. So if you're calling me a fucking virtue signaller, you can fuck off. You can fuck right off. And be gone. I couldn't give a toss. You're lucky you're a fucking moderator. You're lucky I tolerate some of the things you actually put on me that are borderline. Borderline. At best. There are 3 things I fucking hate in this world. Pedos, racists, and homophobes. Oh, and domestic violence perpetrators, men and women. So if you're calling me a fucking virtue signaller, you can fuck off. I hate champagne socialists. I hate the fucking woke brigade. I hate cancel culture. I hate the right wing and I hate the left wing in equal fucking measure. I seem to remember the Trump live stream, which I ranted for 2 hours. 2 hours. Because some yank was thick enough to go, what are my views on Trump? The next night, he apologised. That was back in 2018. I have a hatred of racists, a hatred of homophobes, and a hatred of fucking bigots. I also hate the left wing because they are trying to divide. I have a hatred of the mainstream media because they are trying to divide. And I have a hatred of the right wing as well because they are trying to divide and blame minorities for their abuse. So there you go. Now you know my views on the subject. I'm fully believing these players. You don't get three separate players who did not play together at the same time making the same fucking complaint. And Rafiq had two spells at Yorkshire. He's referring to his first spell at Yorkshire, where he made a complaint and it was not properly investigated. He then went public with his allegations last year of a complaint he made in 2010. Regardless of his qualities as a player, good or bad, that is a historical allegation. The fact that two other players, separate from him, in separate complaints, made complaints, says to me that Yorkshire is an institutionally fucked cricket club. Why he returned, I don't know. The fact that the investigation upheld 7 of his complaints tells you that they were like, let's try and brush this under the carpet. Let's not have some negative publicity. Bearing in mind, one of their ex-players, Jeffrey Boycott, is a known wife beater. The fact that their head coach is now suspended for making racial slurs about the Jewish minority in this country says that there is a problem at fucking Yorkshire. The fact that other players have come out and said, I'm not surprised what's going on at Yorkshire, but we've not had any personal issues ourselves within the game, says something, that it's not a unknown secret. It is quite well known within the cricketing community that there is an issue at Yorkshire. The fact that the whole board resigned en masse, and the chairman said, we're not racist, we're just a bit backwards in our thinking. You could not make this up. I make parallels with other abuse or racist or other scandals that involve bullying and complaints not being upheld with other sports and other leagues because they are relevant. That does not make me a fucking virtue signaller. Would I rather have a team of a multi-ethnic background that's talented? Yes. Would I have a team of 11 crap white players? No. Would I have a team of 11 crap Pakistani Brits? No. I want the best players playing at every fucking level, for both national side and county side. The colour of their skin does not bother me. Their domestic ethnic background does not bother me. That's TalkSport. TalkSport is a crap radio station. The fact he's even on the air surprises me. But it's football. You can commit sexual assault and be rehired. It's fine. That's football. Football is a sport in crisis, but no one wants to talk about it. Because as soon as you mention the race card, you're going to get hate on social media. Trevor Sinclair should not be anywhere near the mainstream media. The guy is a joke. He's a joke. TalkSport is a joke of a station. I don't listen to it anymore. It is crap. It is crap. They get some idiots on there who really should be nowhere near the mainstream media. And Trevor Sinclair is a known racist pisshead with also domestic violence allegations. He should be nowhere near the mainstream media. I don't think they will start playing crap players. I think they need to change their their structures within that cricket club. They have got a culture issue. They have got a win at all costs culture, regardless of the quality of players that are playing. The fact that 3 separate players, regardless of their background, made a complaint at 3 different times without no communication with each other says to me that there's an issue. It's like the Harvey Weinstein allegations. None of these women had any conversations with each other. They all made complaints throughout the years. NHL. three separate employees of the Chicago Blackhawks, including two players, one of whom has gone public, made complaints about that coach over a 2-year spell, and they gave him a letter of recommendation, and he raped another player at youth level at a high school. I don't know why TalkSport keep employing him. They're going for this tick box exercise where they've got to get as many people from as many minority backgrounds as possible on the radio, and it's just shit. It's just shit. I don't know why Trevor Sinclair is still employed. I have no idea. Maybe because he served his sentence. I don't know. Yes, he racially abused a police officer, and he was drunk, and he was an embarrassment, and he assaulted a police officer. He is still allowed to be on the air. For that, I don't know. I'm not a fan of Trevor Sinclair. Was he a brilliant player? Yes. Is he an arsehole of a human being and an abortion of a human being? Absolutely. Is Aaron Rodgers an absolute tit in the NFL with his anti-vax views? Absolutely. Please get COVID. Please die. Right. Is Colin Kaepernick an arsehole as well, who had ulterior motives for money? Absolutely. He did obviously abuse his... He got a massive payout. It was about money. It's not the fact he wasn't a very good player. Politics and sport is not a good mix. It's not. It's a very bad mix. Dangerous. Even. Frustrating. The point of insanity. However, please do not call me a virtual signaller. I don't know why TalkSport continue to employ Trevor Sinclair. I don't know why the Sky Group continue to employ Trevor Sinclair. To be fair, I don't know how Jamie Carragher still has a job on Sky after his spitting incident, which is basically classed as assault. I don't know how he kept his job. I don't. I really don't. It's like Jeffrey Boycott has still got a job in commentary. He is a convicted wife beater. How any of these people still have jobs is beyond me. Jeffrey Boycott still got a job. He beat his wife. He was convicted of domestic violence. Still got a job. He's still on the radio. He's still on Test Match Special. The guy's a cunt. Can't stand him. How Trevor Sinclair and Jeffrey Boycott are still in the media, I have no logical idea. How Hope Solo is still in women's football after, again, child abuse allegations and being found guilty of child neglect of her niece and nephew, I have no idea. So gender and race has got fuck all to do with it. Like Wayne Rooney, like he's still employed by he's had multiple drink drive convictions. Multiple. Still a football manager. You know? Look, I've met Jamie Carragher. It's a very I can't understand what he's saying. Like how some of these people still have careers in the media is beyond me, male or female. And they are high profile sports. How? How? Please explain, because I can't. I can't. I look at the NFL and my God, how Michael Vick had a career after dogfighting allegations. In fact, was found guilty of animal abuse and having a dogfighting ring for money, and he still had an NFL career after that. Please explain. There are players in the NFL with firearms offences and domestic violence. How? Brain explodes. Brain explodes. There's a I forget the NFL player right now who's been charged with death by drink driving. He was 2 or 3 times over the state drink driving limit of the state he was in. He has killed someone. His contract has not been terminated. Aaron Hernandez had firearms offences and possession of drugs and assault allegations before he actually became a serial killer. Okay? He was still given a contract extension. Professional sport has a problem. We have got players right now in the NRL caught on videotape that coked off their tits during lockdown restrictions in Australia who are still on contract. Explain. Explain how that is acceptable. Sport has a problem where if you or I do that, we are sacked. We are investigated by the authorities. High profile sports star, look, I'm doing this. Oh, you're just on a drink ban for a year. You got to go to rehab, but you're still employed. We're not going to sack you. Like, seriously. How Trevor Sinclair still has a job in the media is beyond me. It is beyond me. Ron Atkinson, however, is no longer in the media because he might have made several racist and homophobic and sexist comments and is quite rightly sacked. And was sacked about 15 years ago. How are you glad that I'm fucking angry about this, and how do you think you find it funny? Obviously, you've never been a victim of abuse or bullying or anything then, where your complaints went unheard. Because I can tell you I was. Oh, yeah. The fact that Kane, Sterling, Maguire, and etc., that's down to the selectors. Okay, that's down to the coach. Okay, you can criticise Southgate, and that's fine. Do not try and bring race into the fact these guys are playing for England football, because that's what you're linking it to. All right, that's what you're linking it to. I'm pissed off that a sporting organisation, in fact, several, which are meant to be like beacons of the community, right? We have got child abuse in football, where the FA failed, yet the FA board still there. They haven't taken any fucking responsibility for decades of child abuse in football. Decades. Right? FA, not a single member of the FA board has gone, apart from the chairman who resigned over what exactly? Like a race scandal, something? Yeah. Right? 30, 40 years of child abuse in football, not a single FA board member has gone. Still there. Still there. They have had parliamentary select inquiries of culture, media, and sport about the abuse scandal in football. Not a single FA executive has lost their fucking job. Not a single one. Hardly any club executives have lost their jobs. Not a single one. A couple have resigned, but no one's been sacked. Oh, here's a letter of apology. We're so sorry that your son or daughter was sexually abused by one of our coaches. Bullshit. The NHL, Chicago Blackhawks, two separate abuse issues. One of a physical assault by a coach and racist assault, right? Another one, severe sexual assault. A second player who was aware of what was going on, who remains unnamed, also backed up Carl Beach in his allegations in the NHL about the Chicago Blackhawks. And then an NHL intern who is a collegiate student who is there on work experience was also sexually assaulted. What did the Chicago Blackhawks do? 3 weeks later, they tell him to resign. They give him a letter of recommendation. He then teaches us a high school and rapes a high school student. Only now, 11 years later, have people resigned from their positions. They haven't been fired, they have resigned. Southgate is a yes man for the FA. The FA is a joke. The FA's racist and bullying and sexist policies, as in dealing with these issues, has been told to be out of date and archaic, and they need to improve. Have those recommendations been implemented? No. No. The abuse those players suffered after that final was disgraceful. Social media has done nothing. Absolutely nothing. The US Olympic scandal with the gymnastics went on for 2 decades with that doctor. Multiple complaints and concerns were raised about Dr. Nasir, and nothing was done for years until one of the higher profile gymnasts said, he did this to me. Suddenly something happens when it's a higher profile player. But when it's a lower profile athlete, carry on. You're not important enough, carry on. Allegations against British cycling, British swimming, British bobsleigh. The win at all cost mentality. Win at all cost mentality. It's all coming out now. Sport should be fun. It should be enjoyable, inclusive for everyone. Sport is having a reckoning that the rest of society has been having for a long time. And what pisses me off is the people in charge of the sports administration have still got jobs, or they're not being sacked. They resign. They're allowed to get a payout because they resign. They get a big payout. They're allowed to still be involved in sport down the line. They're not banned. Look, Southgate is a moron of a coach. We were lucky to get to that final. He ballsed up that final from a winning position. I think Boothroyd was in the last year of his contract anyway, and yeah. I've argued about forced diversity doesn't work. It's got to be grassroots. You've got to go out and liaise with communities. That's clearly not happening because we're just seeing forced diversity from the top. It's got to happen from the bottom up. You can't have, you must do as we say. Doesn't work. There's resistance. It's got to happen naturally. You've got to go out with the organisation going, let's do some surveys. Let's actually go out into the community. Oh, look, Southgate is an absolute pillock. He's a yes man. He doesn't want argument. He's useless. He's just there to do what he's told. I'm not even sure if he's fully selecting the team, to be honest. He's an absolute wet. I'm not a fan of Southgate as England coach because he doesn't play to the team's strengths, regardless of the players on the field. Quick pace counter attack is where our strength is. Let's play possession football. Let's not, please. We've got the Rooney rule in the NFL, and there's been complaints about that because coaches who are not good enough are getting positions. But then people kicked off because a female GM in Major League Baseball, a female general manager, can't have that. But if she's a fan of the sport and has studied the sport and reads the stats and knows what player development is, I think she should be there if she's good enough. People lost their minds. Guess what? Her team's actually pretty good. We had a female referee in the FA Cup at the weekend. I didn't complain. She was actually very, very good at her job, better than the men. The players actually stopped swearing at her. There was a female referee in the St Albans Forest Green game. Best refereeing performance I've seen in about 10 years. And the players, not one player gave her abuse when she made a decision. Not one player effed and blind. There was no dissent. None. So if you're good enough, regardless of your background, you should get the job. If you're good enough. Problem is when we're getting people just getting the job because of their gender or their background. And they're not good enough. And it's proven with Rugby Australia, with Riding Castle. Absolutely out of their depth. Just because she was very good at netball administration, that's an all women's sport. Couldn't cope with Rugby Australia. Ballsed up. Ballsed up. And she was not even Australian. It's not that. Counter attack is what we work best because we've got pace. You've got pace in that team. Defensively, we're not good enough. And pace in the team. Quick pace attack. Slow, methodical build up doesn't work. We tried it, it didn't work. We threw away a 1-0 lead in the final because we decided to go from quick pace counter attack and fast paced attack to slow, methodical build up, and it was crap. I've watched a lot of tournaments. The governor, Paul Ince, one of the best midfielders we've ever produced. One of the hard as bloody nails. John Barnes, underrated winger. Seen him play, met him up. He's a very nice chap. Very nice chap. Something that bothers me, and has bothered me for a long time, is the governing bodies of a variety of sports. It is the old boys' club, or the old girls' club if we're talking about netball and women's sport. It's not representative of the whole wider society. They've been called out on it, and they're making reactionary decisions. Maguire, I wouldn't say Maguire's too slow to play. He's not a centre back you want to be your leader. He's your junior centre back in a partnership. You need a centre back next to him who guides him. He's good as a partnership. He's not the main centre back. He needs to have a main centre back. If Maguire's playing alongside Vidic, he'll be the junior partner in that partnership. He's not the senior partner in a centre back partnership. He should not be given the responsibility of leading the defence. He's a follower, not a leader. That's why he doesn't work as club captain for Man United. He was never club captain or the senior leader in that defence at Leicester. Same with at Hull. There was always a senior centre back or a senior defender or a senior leader in the leadership group. He's not a leader. He's a follower. He's a fair unit. He's a physical player, but he's not a leader. I wouldn't say he's too slow. I think he needs to have someone alongside him who can position him. But then again, I don't really overly care about football as much as I used to, especially at the Premier League level. I'm not really fussed. There's too many negative headlines, and the sport's so badly governed, it's ridiculous. There is no decisive leadership. There's too much bickering and not enough direction, not just of the FA, but of the UEFA and FIFA, and there's too much corruption within the sport. It's becoming unwatchable. Our defence is just not good enough, full stop. It's just not good enough, full stop. We don't have enough experienced veteran defenders who are competent enough and solid enough. Because I honestly believe the quality of football is less now than what it was 20 years ago. That's my opinion. Oh yeah, no, we've got some pretty good young players, but they're not the finished article yet. Yorkshire swept it under the carpet. They didn't want to have their bad public image. They didn't want a bad public image. They wanted to win, and they are a very successful side. They've produced so many players of all backgrounds over decades, decades. But they were more obsessed with their public image and harming the success of the team, disrupting the balance. So with the NHL, the Chicago Blackhawks, they were more obsessed with winning and their public image than actually dealing with the problem, admitting we have a problem. We'll cover it up. We'll cover it up for as long as possible. So with US gymnastics, win at all costs, regardless of the harm caused. British cycling, British swimming, the bobsleigh program, win at all costs, be as successful as possible, public image. It's all about public image and being successful. The welfare of the athletes and the players, let's win. Got to win. Can't disrupt the balance of the team, the chemistry of the team. You've got a player being sexually assaulted, or you've got an athlete being racially abused. Oh no, the chemistry of the team's being affected. We've got to win the championship. We've got to win this title. We've got to produce international players. I'm surprised anyone at the ECB is still. The ECB were aware of these allegations. The NHL, for example, and the NHLPA were aware of the Chicago allegations and did not act and did not protect. And the only person to keep their job is the Winnipeg Jets GM. And while he had the right intentions, he still had the opportunity to go to the authorities. He believed. Well, there's also white grooming gangs. There's Irish travellers who kidnap and enslave people. There's institutional failings. This discussion belongs on our channel, but there's institutional failings, and the police can't be seen to have failed, and they're terrified of being accused of racially profiling some of these ethnically based criminal gangs, regardless if it's sexual grooming or organised crime or spate of crime, gang crime at street level. They're terrified of, oh, we're racially profiling. Yeah. Oh, Simone Biles, yeah, she is broken. She's absolutely destroyed mentally. Physically, her body's broken anyway, hence why he was the team's physician. She was constantly competing hurt. And gymnastics destroyed. Beth Tweddle, her knees or ankles were destroyed as well. Gymnasts, their careers are generally short because their bodies are wrecked. Um, it doesn't matter if you're white, black, Asian. The police didn't act. The local councils were aware that vulnerable young people were being exploited. Um, and the same with the Yorkshire Cricket Club. The same is in the NHL, US Gymnastics, the FA. Young, vulnerable people, because anyone who's under the age of minority is a young, vulnerable person. Regardless, it's like that young Man City academy player who had a bad injury, and Man City failed him. They failed him. They let him go. Like, you're injured. We don't want you anymore. We're not going to rehabilitate you. We're not going to work with you and try and get you right again. We're not going to look after you post football if you don't make it. We're not going to give you opportunities in education. They let him down. He hung himself. Athlete welfare. As long as the team is successful, you're expendable. Can't disrupt the chemistry of the winning team. No, we're a winning organisation. Look at all the good we've done in the community with all these community projects, but you're letting down vulnerable young people. And oh yeah, he's a very he got racially assaulted on the tube, and he was a former extremist. He had some extreme views because he was an angry young man who felt let down by the system, and he's admitted that he was a young angry man. This is how sectarianism works in the Troubles. Angry, predominantly young men, but some young women are angry. They feel disadvantaged. They feel let down, and it happens in sport, which is a gateway out of poverty or out of unemployment. And this is where a lot of football players, especially, don't have an education outside of football because they put everything they've got into getting out of a. Marcus Rashford comes from a very, very poor, humble background. He's done very well for himself. But if he isn't a football player, what is he? He's a gang member, or he's dead, or he's on the dole. You could say the same about players like Vinnie Jones. If he wasn't a football player, he would probably be a street thug. Um, any South American player, they don't get out of the slums, they're going to end up in a street gang. A lot of sports athletes from working class backgrounds, it's their escape from being unemployed, violence, especially from big inner city areas. And they are vulnerable kids. And for them, sport is an escape from poverty. It's the same in Italy. It's the same in Spain. Italy, especially with the mafia. I mean, crikey, if you are from a like Napoli or Bar and you end up in a poor neighbourhood, what's your escape? Sport. Unemployment's at 40%. But yeah, Rashford comes from a single parent household in a very poor, deprived area of Manchester. He's done very well for himself. And yeah, his father is a failure. But also at the same time, the government's got to invest in these areas. He was lucky. He was very good at football at school. And he was also very good at school considering his background. He did very well at school, very well for himself. Wayne Rooney, ironically, if he doesn't do well at football, yes, he's got 11 GCSEs, I think, and 2 A levels. Wayne Rooney, ironically, for considerably meant to be a thick scouser, he's actually pretty smart when it comes to his education. He gets a lot of abuse in the media for like being a scouser basically and generally being thick. He's actually got 11 GCSEs and 2 A levels as Wayne Rooney. But again, if he doesn't do well at football, what's he going to do? He's probably going to end up in a street gang. And Liverpool's rife with crime. Again, he's from a poor working class background. His brothers have done all right in football as well. They've done reasonably well. But this is the thing: a lot of young, especially men, find an escape in sport. They struggle at school predominantly. They struggle finding work. Sport is an escape for them. It is an escape for them. And yeah, it is the government's fault for not investing in these areas and giving employment opportunities and reducing crime. That is on the police. That is on the local authority. That is on government. And for a lot of these young men and some young women, when it comes to professional sport, it is an escape from poverty and a lifetime of crime because there's no other opportunity. And yeah, Rashford's father is a bit of a cunt. But at the same time, he was from a poor area of Manchester, a very deprived area of Manchester. A good friend of mine is actually at university in Manchester and was attacked on the way home, left with a well, he's now got a metal plate in his head. He went to that city to learn. He's now got a metal plate in his head. He's had to have his face reconstructed. So yeah, you've got Manchester. It's a highlight of the north. There's loads of investment. There are still massively deprived areas. I've been to Liverpool to watch Liverpool play at Anfield. Where Goodison Park and Anfield are by Stanley Park is a very deprived area, inner city area. It's not pleasant. And for those kids who make it into the academy at Liverpool, Everton, or Tranmere, and end up playing professional football in Merseyside, it's an escape from some rather unpleasantness. That's why there's so many Scousers playing football professionally in England and Scotland. So many. There were so many at the weekend in the FA Cup. And reason being, they've escaped from, and in my opinion, a not very pleasant life. Chelsea 05 or Arsenal 04. I'm going to go for the Arsenal Invincibles as the best club season. That's, I think, was that 2002, the Invincibles era? I would say Arsenal in 2002 was, I think, the best team we've seen. Better than Man United of '99. Chelsea of 2005 is close, very close. They're the three best teams I think I've ever seen of a single season, in my opinion. In my opinion. But we've seen some good teams before and since. But I think that late '90s, early 2000s period of the Premier League, we had some pretty good sides vying for top spot every season. I mean, best sides never to win the Premier League. I think Rafa Benitez is Liverpool. You think what these footballers could do? A fair few of them have joined various programs. I know Juan Mata has got his charitable foundation, and he's very angered by the lack of uptake from other professional football players. I know Earl Crabtree, who's an ex-Huddersfield Giants rugby league player, has done a lot of community outreach. I'm a big fan of Earl Crabtree. Check him out. I mean, he was, I think, one of the most underrated forwards in rugby league. I know Adrian Morley's done a lot as an ex-player. He set up his own business. He's in the construction industry now. He tries to get again young people from inner city areas into the construction industry. So there are individual sportsmen who've done their community outreach um, over either during or after their careers, and these are role models. And I do think Marcus Rashford and Juan Mata and Adrian Morley and Earl Crabtree, both be it current or past professional athletes, have done a lot to inspire and to get people, especially young people, away from that kind of gang culture. And yeah, they could do more. I know there's several clubs that do have the community outreach programs in the communities that uh, they're based in. But yeah, Juan Mata has been very public in his disappointment of less than of other players in the English and European football systems for not joining his foundation. Manny Pacquiao's done a lot for the Philippines and is now running for president. He done a lot of fundraising and trying to get people out of poverty in the Philippines. So there are individual athletes and sports stars that, yeah. I mean, we've got the Kick It Out campaign that clearly hasn't worked. We've got Rainbow Laces that clearly hasn't worked. um, as charitable organisations. Um, there does need to be, yeah. I mean, where I live, Reading, there's been like 5 fatal stabbings the last couple of months in Reading. One of them literally by my friend's house. Just I've got friends who live around the corner from where a couple of fatal stabbings happened. I think there's been 5 in Reading in the last couple of months, and I live down the road from there. Um, one of the perpetrators was from Wokingham, where I live, and this is the home counties. Apparently, this kind of crime doesn't happen at home there, and it's every day. There's been 5 fatals in Reading in 6 months. 5, 5, and some of my work colleagues know one of the victims. So yeah, that's something that happens regularly, and not enough's done about it. And yet, Thames Valley Police are saying, "Oh, it's down." Yeah, and I do believe sport has a role to play in this, especially football, rugby league, cricket. There's a lot of working class lads who play these sports, and women as well to a certain extent. Um, they do have a role to play. Um, obviously, government schemes and police is not working. Um, well, I mean, look, is the Premier League, is the Football League, the Premier League, the FA embarrassed about it? Well, they want, you know, to drive the women's game, which I do enjoy. Um, they want to drive social inclusion. Well, at the same time, they should also use their position as role models to try and work to, yeah, get get kids and young adults away from guns and knives. I don't think they're doing enough. Well, whatever they're doing, it's not working. It's not just London. It's Birmingham. It's Manchester. It's Liverpool. It's in the home counties. Um, certain cities like Nottingham's got an issue with gun crime. Derby's got an issue with gun crime. Manchester, London, um, Slough, a lot of stabbings in Slough, and of course, just up the road from Slough is West London, where several high-profile football league clubs play. Reading, down the road from the Medeski, literally 10-minute walk from the Medeski. 2 fatal stabbings in the last week. 2, and I know the areas of Reading that those stabbings happen. Yeah, Bristol. Uh, you know, it's not just London. It's not just London. Every major urban area. It's happening a lot more outside London in the southeast as well, where I live. I mean, every other day, well, a lot. Bear in mind, a lot of these players come from poor working class backgrounds, and they know, or they grew up with people who ended up in gangs. So it should hit home. But again, from what from what I see of professional athletes now, they live in a bubble. They're scouted very young, and they from the age of like 11, 12, 13, they don't really live in the same world as the rest of us. Once they're in that academy, they don't live in the same world as the rest of us. When they hit 16 and they sign that first professional contract, they are wrapped in cotton wool. And they can't cope retiring when they retire. Loads of them can't cope. Oh, well, I mean, I am surprised more professional football clubs, rugby league clubs, rugby union clubs, professional sport in general don't have more um, links to charities and outreach programs to try and encourage kids and young adults away from gangs and drugs. I am really surprised. It doesn't help when high profile athletes are caught using recreationals, regardless of what we believe on the legalities of that, because consumption is not illegal. But I have my views on recreational drug use, and I think it should be legalised and regulated, just like alcohol and tobacco. That's my personal opinion on that, and that's again a conversation for the other channel. But it doesn't help when some of these high-profile athletes, are doing things they shouldn't. And I will use Kyle Walker as an example because he's had his fair share of social media blunders that have got him in trouble. Um, and he's a reprehensible human being, really, in my personal opinion. With some of his antics. Um, and yeah, look, I think sport and social issues go hand in hand. We've obviously got a bit heated tonight in our views on various things. Um, yeah, I remember that there was allegations of three England players using cocaine and an England player with a prescription. I believe it was prescription medicational abuse and alcohol problems. Probably Danny Drinkwater, to be fair, because he's had his issues with alcohol, and obviously he's no longer in the Premier League. But again, that's speculation and that's unfair. Um, but yeah, there was rumours going around. And again, this is where I'm not really a big fan of how the media has reported a lot of these issues. If there's a player who's battling substance abuse, and it's normally prescription medication and alcohol, I do believe that they do have the right to anonymity and not to have their business in the press. Um, that's my opinion on that topic. Um, and that's always been my opinion, is you have the right to privacy in that regard. Tony Adams obviously has his addiction foundation, his recovery village thing. He's an ex-alcoholic, obviously, and the amount of he started off for football players because obviously his issues with alcohol, Paul Gascoigne's issues with alcohol, Paul Merson's addiction with drugs and alcohol. They were sort of his contemporaries, and he set up his addiction foundation. So that's another ex-player doing something right by and he's surprised not only with the amount of athletes, sports stars coming to his addiction centre, but just members of the public, like average average people. Um, and yeah, Tony Adams is another one who I think has done a lot of good outside of since retiring. But again, it's not enough, and I do think professional sport does have an issue with addiction, and I've discussed it before. And sport is seemingly turning a blind eye to it, and has been for quite some time, in my opinion. That's my opinion. Not everyone can agree with that. Um, and sport and social issues are going hand in hand here. There's a lot going on that I think sport could do more, and in certain cases, it's clearly failed and failed badly. And we're having a reckoning in the last couple of years. A lot of things are coming out where the checks and balances failed, cover-ups were put in place to protect the sports image or the club's image or the team's image or that sports image or that individual coach or whatever. Not just in this country, but further afield. And it's not good enough, in my opinion. Not good enough. A fair bit of damage has been done. So football clubs can. Well, it doesn't matter if they are or not. The fact individual players and ex-players are actively involved in charitable foundations or setting up addiction centres is like Tony Adams. I've spoken about his addiction centre, rehabilitation centre before. Um, he set it up partly because of what happened to him and Paul Merson and Paul Gascoigne, and he is surprised with the amount he set up football players primarily, and then it just ballooned into what it is. Um, and he's generally shocked by the amount of not just athletes, but again, members of the public who go to his facility for counselling and help. And it's not just football. He's like it's every sport you can think of. Horse racing has a massive issue with cocaine use. So many jockeys are getting suspended for cocaine use. It's ridiculous. Um, do we have cricket fans? Yeah, we got a bit heated over a cricketing issue or two. But yeah, cricket is in the spotlight for the wrong reasons. Um, yeah, no, yeah, well, it's mostly the flat jockeys because they've got to keep their weight down. In regards to jump jockeys, you get the lead weight to put in the saddle, so top weight to bottom weight. But yeah, it's in regards to yeah, flat jockey. I don't like flat horse racing because you know the horses are full of steroids and the jockeys are full of amphetamines and cocaine. Um, so many jockeys are getting suspended. So many. A couple of, I think one or two took. I think one took his life after getting suspended and overdosed deliberately, killed himself. I think last year or the year before. Jump jockeys and jump horse racing. I love national hunt racing. And the animal welfare groups going, oh, but the horses, when they fall over and get hurt, it's like, yes, they are treated better than humans, those horses. Flat racing, I'm not a fan of it. I never have been. The horses are just doped full of steroids and medications that are no good for them. And the jockeys, in order to make the weight, um, are forced into real unhealthy, drastic, either weight reduction pills, cocaine and speed to keep their weight down, nicotine patches because nicotine actually is an appetite suppressant. Um, so I'm not a big fan of flat racing. I do love my national hunt racing. I always have. National hunt horses are treated better than humans, um, and the jockeys are actually at a healthier weight. They're not forced to. Um, well, once the horse is broken, its leg has got to be put down. There are ways to do it. There are ways to do it. Shooting in the head is the quickest way. It's how they do it at abattoirs with the hammer to the head on them with cattle and pigs and all that. Um, generally, the jump horses are better treated when they're in training. They're better treated when they retire, and the jockeys are the ones who have some horrific injuries. But the jockeys at national hunt racing generally have better health, regardless of the injuries that they sustain. But when they come off, they're not forced to constantly lose weight because you've got the weights they put in the saddle to even it out if the jockey's slightly lighter or slightly heavier, which is the handicap. And I've been to a few horse stud farms where the former race horses are allowed to just roam freely and have a gallop around, and they are very well looked after. Flat horses, however, those that run on the flat circuit, I don't like how they're treated. Um, and I don't like how the jockeys are forced into really drastic weight. Same with boxing as well, and you've got to make your weight. Um, the weight divisions. That's that when it all cost mentality that I don't like, and horse racing, especially when it comes to flat racing, needs to look after its horses and its jockeys better. Josh Butler, I love Josh Butler. Josh Butler is a cricketing freak. Josh Butler is a cricketing freak. His shot selection is insane. He's 100% attack. I just love Josh Butler. Um, I would. It's like AB de Villiers. He's like the new version of AB de Villiers. It's just there is no defense with him. It's just all out attack, and he just goes for it. Um, which is a breath of fresh air because there've been times in cricket where you've got an overly defensive. overly defensive batting lineup. Josh Butler, same as Sam Curran, they just attack when they've got bat in hand, and I love watching them play. I'm not a big fan though when it comes to the shorter formats of like the power play overs. You don't have it in Test cricket. Why should have it in the shorter format? Especially if you've got players of that kind of attacking intent. It doesn't matter if you have a field restriction or not. They're going to whack it for six, drill it for four. They're running between the wickets is insane. And Josh Butler in the Test side is brilliant as well. I just love Josh Butler. I mean, I like AB de Villiers as well. There is no backward step with these players in their time. And of course, AB de Villiers, AB's now retired, which is a shame, but he's influenced Josh Butler. Um, who else? I mean, the past players that were quite attack. I mean, Jack Callis. Jack Callis for me was possibly the best all rounder ever. Um, well, you can't bowl a bad ball in the shorter formats. I mean, one day, 50 over game, you can get away with the odd bad ball, but T20, your bad ball, you're going for six, or it's going to be an expensive over. Um, they also shorten the boundaries in T20, which I don't like. Have the same pitch requirements for all formats. The shorter boundaries annoys me because we know in Test cricket they can hit sixes. So why shorten the boundary for T20? I know it's an exciting format, but they're going to bat it out there. I mean, crikey, when Chris Gale can hit it over a stand, it doesn't matter that you shorten the boundary. But the bowling is more erratic in T20. You've got to be so accurate. But that's why Lassis Malinga is possibly the best T20 and one day bowler of all time, in my opinion, for his accuracy with the Yorker. Johnny Bairstow, Bairstow. I'm not sold on Bairstow. His technique doesn't matter if it's a short format or test. He always wafts his outside edge. He regularly gets caught with the outside edge. His technique when he's having to be forced to be more defensive, his technique is terrible. And he's a Yorkshireman. The irony. But for me, if you've got like a more defensive, orthodox batsman and an aggressive batsman, you just run the singles. Got to keep the scoreboard ticking over. Got to keep sharing the strike. If one player just takes too long, and you need that defensive player occasionally to build an innings around, but you need to just keep quick singles. You need to be very good in between the wickets, and you got to keep prodding and prodding. Getting a single here, two there. Milan, he's a good player. Don't forget that he's a good player. He's more orthodox though than some of the others in the short format. But I think you need to have more explosive players in the shorter format and the longer format. You need to have a good balance, and that's when New Zealand get it right. New Zealand work as a unit in all formats. New Zealand for me are the best side in the world right now in all three formats, consistently, just consistently solid. I'm not a big fan of Owen Morgan, but who's going to play the final? I haven't been following the T20, but if it's anything like what we saw in 2019, it could be England, New Zealand. But we'll see. India are out, so that tells you what you need to know about how India played. Pakistan are always dangerous and unpredictable. Bangladesh were poor. Um, I think New Zealand could win this. I think England. I think New Zealand could win this because they play as a unit. from match one to the final. They proved in the World Cup that they came up a bit short in that crazy super over, but I think New Zealand. I think they want vengeance on the one day World Cup. That'd be my opinion. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't think the ECB have got the balance right with the formats and the domestic game for a long time. I think the ECB's got the balance wrong with their setup. But yeah, but I think the balance is not necessarily right with the England setup when it comes to the formats of the game. I don't think they've got the balance of the setup right. That's again personal opinion on that one. But uh, we'll see what happens. I'm not sold the Test side being in the right. Oh, but the text message in the right frame at the moment. But again, that's personal opinion on that one. But yeah, that's but um now you've got to play every game to win. Uh, this is where in certain team tournaments you like you're looking at strength of opposition. You've got to play every game to win. No, I think New Zealand. I think New Zealand consistently in Test, One Day, and T20 have been so consistent, and their program works well. But again, I'm not. I mean, for a nation their size, where cricket isn't the main sport, they've been solidly consistent uh, for a long time, and they've gone under the radar for a long time. Um, the world rankings, I think, are flawed as well in a lot of sports. Um, so that's again my personal opinion on that one. They still got to World Cup final in 2019 in the one day format, and they are consistently a team unit. If the batting lineup struggles, the bowling and fielding gets them out of the hole. And occasionally they just explode with the bat, but they're consistently with the bat. Okay, they're not the strongest, but they're a team unit, and team unity and methodology goes a long way. Um, when it comes to success. So I think New Zealand will be underrated, and yeah, be it at your peril. They can turn up on the day and do something which is dangerous. And yeah, if they can get a start and get in, they can be very hard to get out. And depending on weather conditions and pitch conditions, again that can have a bearing on how the game is played out in the end. And if they prove they're very good at adapting to conditions as well. So for me, New Zealand are definitely slight underdogs, but on their day, they are the best team in the world because they're just so consistent. They're so consistent. That's what's scary about New Zealand. They are just dangerously consistent and have been for a very, 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 very long time. Um, that's my opinion on New Zealand. So, um, but you know, again, it all depends on the bowling as well. If you put the team in a bat and you bowl poorly and they put up a total, and then you bat chasing the total and they bowl well, their bowling unit is dangerous. Very, very dangerous. So, you know, it's what it is, really. But again, like, uh, it is what it is. Anyway, I'm going to call it a day because I've been going for 3.5 hours now. Uh, and yeah, but their bowling attack is dangerous. Um, their bowling attack can restrict the opposition scoreline and make their batting easier if they decide to bowl first. They can definitely restrict a total, and then it makes it easier for their batters to chase. And they also like close games as well. They perform very well under pressure in close games. Uh, so it's one of them. But anyway, I'm going to call it a night. I've got to be up like in a few hours. I've got to be up at like 3, 4 o'clock. It's what, 8:45. So I'm calling it a night. And yeah, it'll be interesting if whoever wins the toss and yeah, the pitch conditions um, has a fair part to play. But you saw in the in the one day World Cup 2 years ago, New Zealand I think were the better side in the tournament, and it went down to that super over. But New Zealand for me were the best side in that tournament, and it was an all round team effort. So, and while the batting lineup, their batting is their weaker of their disciplines. Their bowling attack is lethal. Their upper order is lethal, and their fielding is world class. And they are just so consistent. They work as a unit. So if their batting lineup is struggling, the bowling picks it up. If their bowling's a little bit subdued, their upper order gets them out, and they're very competent. It doesn't matter if it's the short formats or the test arena; they are dangerous from top to bottom. Anyway, thank you very much, and I will see you all very, very soon.